Oh, oh. Alrighty, gamers, how's it going? Daybreaker Rein here, coming at you through your video scope with another episode of Just Another Gaming Rant live. I am here joined today with my friend Xanthan, and we are going to be talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake and a lot of stuff that we have to say and talk about with that. We both were actually pretty neck and neck with how close we were playing the game together, wouldn't you say, Xanthan?
Yeah, I think you finished it about 4 hours after me.
Yeah, something about that because I stayed up all night trying to finish it.
We,
But
we both pretty much started at 10 p.m. April 9th. Because of our time zone, we get games at 10 p.m. instead of midnight.
yeah, it was a wild ride. We were pretty much back and forth talking about several aspects of the game and if we missed certain items and things like that. So it was a lot of fun. So we're going to start off this podcast. Just kind of brief introductions. I already gave mine. So Xanthan, if you want to go ahead and give yours.
Sure. I'm Xanthan. I stream fighting games. Not often anymore, but used to. And other than fighting games, I really, really love JRPGs. I'd say that's my favorite genre is JRPGs. And Final Fantasy VII is actually my favorite game of all time. My most favorite game of all time. Played it when I was 12. I actually played it after playing Kingdom Hearts, and I was so mesmerized by Cloud, the short amount that you get to see him, that I had to play the game that he was originally from. And I've replayed the game only about 5 times since then. I'm 28 now, for perspective. So from age 12 to 28, I've only replayed the game about 5 times. And the last time really solidified it for me that it's my favorite game of all time.
Very nice. Yeah, for me, I've only myself played the original Final Fantasy VII up to a certain point. The reason I know at least the majority of what happens in the game, or have at least a vague understanding of it, is because my older brother was very very much into the game. That was probably his favorite Final Fantasy. He later did say that his favorite Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy VIII. I don't know if he still stands by that, but it was kind of funny because there was this whole little thing about how he liked 8. My youngest brother liked Final Fantasy IX, and Final Fantasy X is my favorite Final Fantasy. So, but yeah, with my experience with 7, I got to see pretty much the whole game. I remember the most distinct memory I have is watching my older brother fight Emerald Weapon. I didn't actually get to see him finish it, but I remember like the next morning, like as soon as he saw me, he was like, "I did it, one more," because he still hadn't fought Ruby Weapon yet. But yeah,
Did he have the underwater material when he did it?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because I
At least he
know.
had that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. But yeah, I know Xanthan has told me a bunch to play the fan translation. That is more. It's definitely more accurate to the original script. Correct. It.
Yes, and it's actually very comparable to what we just got in the remake.
Okay.
Excuse me. There's a lot of character personality that was lost in the translation, more so than the translation, being grammatically incorrect and stuff like that. You end up missing a lot of you miss a lot of, like, for example, not to jump too far ahead, but the dialogue between Barrett and Cloud is really good in the remake, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really enjoyed that aspect a lot.
It's just as good if you play this retranslation mod. The specific mod is the Reunion mod. If anyone wants to look it up, it's a bit of an extensive process to mod it. It requires that you downgrade the Steam version into the original Windows release, or if you actually have the original Windows release discs, you can just do that.
Yeah.
But it is other than the remake, that's the version I tell people to seek out if they're savvy enough. I'll of course tell them just get the PS4 re-release or the PSN version. But if you really want to get I wouldn't say, oh, you actually know the story now. It's not like an old anime where it's been completely rewritten, but you will get the heart of the game in greater capacity if you play the Reunion mod.
Let's see. Well, there's a recommendation for anybody who happens to catch the archive of this podcast. So we want to go ahead and jump in. So we kind of talked a little bit about both of our history with Final Fantasy VII. So what were your expectations going into the remake? Because I know that the musings of the remake have predated the actual official announcement of it way back when that PS3 tech demo featuring the opening scene of Cloud jumping off the train at the very beginning mission. Um, that circled the realms, and everybody was convinced because of that. Oh, Square has to do Final Fantasy VII, like a remaster or a remake. They're gonna do it, and so that has been going on a while. But when the actual official announcement came out, what were you thinking?
Um, I remember being really dumbfounded when the trailer
Mhm.
finally came out. It was one of those things where I didn't believe it was real, and not in a very not in an elation like, oh my god, it's happening. It was more like, given Square's track record as of late, without getting too much into that, I was very
Mhm.
wary. A lot of people don't like 13. I still have not played Final Fantasy 13.
Me neither.
Um, I can't even remember if 15 was out yet. I think it came out in 2016, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I want to say 15 was already
Yeah.
out.
So the trailer for 7 remake was in 2015. So
Sounds about right. Yeah.
yeah, there was just a lot of uncertainty with Square.
Hmm.
A lot of people, it ranged from, oh, they've lost the plot as far as making games anymore, to it's okay, you know.
Hmm.
So it was just very much waiting with bated breath after the initial trailer came out.
Yeah, I think with me when the official trailer finally launched, like again, talking about that PS3 tech demo that made its rounds, and everybody was already thinking, it made more sense to me to go ahead and make that leap because as we all know with the PS3 there was just not the hardware just wasn't there yet for the scope of what we ended up getting. I don't think we would have gotten the same game had they actually re-released it on the PS3. It probably would have been a shadow of what the remake actually became. We
I
we look
agree.
at situations like The Last Guardian, for example. The Last Guardian was supposed to be a PS3 title. Yeah, I know, but the thing about it is that they didn't feel confident enough to put it on the PS3. That hence why it was released on the PS4, and that kind of happened with a lot of things. I mean, there was the Mortal Kombat X, for example, was supposed to get a PS3 release, and that never happened. So it just, I think the hardware and the technology was just not ready for it. So I think, um, as much as that tech demo was very impressive, I think what we ended up getting with Final Fantasy VII Remake and it being on the next generation of hardware was significantly better than what that tech demo showed us.
Right, or what the potential of a PS3 Final Fantasy 7 would have been.
Exactly.
Right. Um, to move on from the initial trailer, we watched E3 2019 together over here. You
Yes.
came over to my place and we watched
Yeah,
it.
that's right. You coaxed
That
me into it.
right, you weren't really feeling it. I was like, let's watch the Square, the Square
Right.
conference, and that was the most fun I've had watching E3 probably since like 2008 or 2009.
Yeah, it's a good romp with friends usually.
Right, but what they showed was actually interesting too,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, but the reason I brought that up, that was actually the last trailer for the game that I watched. I shut everything off after that point
Yeah.
because I think it's in that trailer that they show Tifa looking out upon the destroyed Sector 7.
Yeah.
And I went, okay, if they are going to show something that is that important, I don't want to see anything else.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
a lot of people might find it weird, given that at the time we knew it was just a remake.
Yeah.
We'll get into that later. But at the time, it was just a remake. So they're like, well, you know everything that's going to happen. But it's my favorite game of all time, and it's being reimagined. I don't want to get spoiled by a trailer on how they're going to handle a scene, for example. So my anticipation for everything after E3 2019, which is where they actually finally talked about the combat system, I pretty much sat on that. Was just the E3 demo and watched nothing else.
Yeah, I think I kept up with some of the trailers because I think I do remember mentioning small things that they showed. But I do have to say that, like, that is something that I've seen a lot about when it comes to trailers nowadays is that they seem to give more key moments away. And I think a lot of that should be, more or less kept off the trailers. Like, obviously, again, like what you said, a lot of people have already played Final Fantasy VII. It's one of the most renowned games of all time. So people would recognize the scene as what it is, but I think that there is some need to suspend that sort of thing for the people who haven't experienced that. I see it a lot with movie trailers a lot too, where they'll put key scenes, or they'll put scenes that don't even make it into the final cut of the movie in the trailer, but it's those scenes that are the thing that get you to buy or go see the movie. So I think games are kind of trying to follow suit. It's like, oh, hey, look, remember this specific aspect? Look at how pretty it looks.
A double-edged sword, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. But I think I kind of was trying my best to kind of keep away from all of the follow-up stuff from E3. And then when the demo launched, I was even hesitant to play the demo because I was like, I don't want to like get this initial impression or play the demo and then I find out that, like, there's something about it I don't like, which was far from the case. The demo basically sold me on the game, more or less. I was all behind it at that point. So
yeah, I woke up at 5 a.m. and I had a message from our friend Jose that said the demo had come out in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
So I played it before work.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not too long of a demo, but it was definitely enough to like get that anticipation going.
Yeah, now it probably wouldn't take too long, but first time through learning what the combat is supposed to do, it took me about 45 minutes. It's a decent demo.
Yeah, 45 minutes to about an hour is what I was seeing people averaging. So yeah, totally understandable. But the demo felt so long when I played it, but then when you actually play that segment in the game, it felt like it went so quickly. Maybe just because I already was familiar with what to expect, so I wasn't taking the time to read back over the instructions or the tutorials or anything like that. I was like, oh, I already know what to expect because I played this part.
Yeah, the only thing they cut from the demo was a small flashback.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. In the demo, the flashback, Jesse asks Cloud if he's close to Tifa.
Oh.
He has a short flashback about Tifa.
Right.
That was not in the demo.
Yeah.
Last thing I have to say about like the pre-release thoughts. Another big reason I was avoiding any sort of info is I feel like there's a certain handful of games that if they're ever remade, it's kind of like the biggest deal in all of video games.
Yeah.
I want to think of a third one, but it's Ocarina of Time. And I mean an actual remake, not the 3DS port. But
Right.
if there was an actual remake of Ocarina of Time, that would be probably a bigger deal than this to most people. And then Final Fantasy VII Remake is also, it's a huge freaking deal. It's such a big deal that I absolutely did not want to even digest anybody else's opinion on the game. I had to have 100% my own opinion, my own experience, and that meant avoiding trailers and also avoiding early reviews, leaks, of course.
Absolutely.
Because the whole freaking game was leaked through PSN. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, Like I know how it happened, but why did it happen?
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, and even today, one of my favorite YouTubers, shout out to Foxcade, he uploaded a 3-hour podcast about this game, and I was starting to listen to it, and I went, I need to do this podcast first, so that way I can get all of my own thoughts out.
Yeah, totally understandable. I'm very much the same way. I mean, even trying my damnedest to avoid my main Twitter because I knew people were going to be posting stuff because I know several people in the Infinite Ammo Syndicate. Shout out to those guys, by the way. I know a bunch of them were playing the game as well. Some of them beat that game way faster than me and you did. And I thought I was kind of, I obviously have a little bit more free time than you do. So I thought I was kind of cranking out the game a lot quicker. But like, yeah, there were some people who were freaking just jamming through it. Like they weren't.
Only reason I beat it at the same pace as you, dude, is I lost sleep.
Yeah. I mean, that's understandable. But yeah, I mean, just trying my damnedest to stay away from anything that could be potential spoiler, because like I really wanted to experience everything that there was. And thankfully, a lot of the key story elements weren't leaked. It was just little minor things like some of the mini games and everything like that, like people just doing the mini games and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that stuff made it onto Twitter, but I kind of noticed that like a lot of the bigger story pieces didn't end up on Twitter, which was nice.
Yeah, even when I beat it, I think the last hour of the game was blocked.
Yeah, like it cuts that whole part. You can't even record it. I mean, of course, you can't record it through the system, but you could probably through other means, however.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on to our next part. So this is going to be broken down. We're going to break down each piece of it. But what was your overall impression of the game once you actually got your hands on it and you've completed it?
Well, what's our little breakdown again? Isn't it gameplay, music, story?
Gameplay, music, graphics, and story. So
Okay.
we'll cover just the broad scope of how we feel about it, and then get into the little intricate details.
Gotcha. Overall, the way I describe it is that I see the remake as not supplemental material, but I see it as additional material. And to kind of explain myself, I don't find it to be, without getting into the spoilers yet, it's not a sequel, but it's definitely world building.
Yeah.
So I see it more, and some might see this as a disservice. I see this as the largest installation in the compilation. So for those who may not know, in 2005, the compilation of Final Fantasy VII was launched. That's Square's fancy way of saying extended universe. It includes the movie Advent Children, the mobile phone Before Crisis, the PS2 game Dirge of Cerberus, and the PSP game Crisis Core.
Mm-hmm.
So I see this as the cap off to all of that, is how I truly see it. And so I don't have any opinion of like, oh, I like the original more for this, or I like the remake more for this. It's to me, it ends up being such a completely separate entity, despite sharing so many things, because it's still a remake.
Yeah.
It's just like, wow, more Final Fantasy VII, cool.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
That would be my shortest summation of what I think of the game. Now, prior to beating it, I didn't feel that way. But after I beat it was once I started to feel that way, because going through it, not having the answers, I had a lot of feelings of, well, is this bad fan service? Because there's a lot of flash forwards to events that we know will not happen in the first part of the remake, because the remake only takes place in Midgar.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of scenes from the end of 7 or the middle of 7, and I'm going, these aren't supposed to be here. This is not logical.
Right.
But that all changed once I beat it.
Yeah. Also, welcome, Jozo. Jozo says, breakdown a breakdown of a breakdown.
Indeed. That's what it is. It's you should hit the DX song, break it down, and we'll start crotch chopping, and then the game will be explained.
So for me, I was really, I mean, I don't necessarily dislike what they did. I was kind of skeptical as going through the game. It was kind of one of those things where like a lot of media and a lot of video games that I play that I absolutely enjoy cover a lot of these sort of like the sort of story elements that they introduced in this remake. And so it was kind of one of those things where like I like that genre of storytelling, but then at the same time I was skeptical. I was like, is this really going to work? Is this going to be the way that they should go about it? I don't necessarily, I think they, because it was more or less wishful thinking to think that it was going to be a 1-to-1. Like already with the changes to combat, for example, and I know there are a lot of people pissed about that, which I guess I understand, but you have to remember that turn-based RPG combat is very niche. It was niche back then. It's so much different now. Like people are not, for lack of a better term, I don't think that a lot of people are patient to have the patience to play
I
those
agree,
titles.
and if I could quickly interject, like I
Absolutely.
agree with your opinion that turn-based combat back then was niche because the whole damn genre was niche
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
'97. So anyway, continue.
Yeah. So I was skeptical. Overall, I enjoyed what I played. I enjoyed the added life I felt to the game. Like, there's just a lot of little intricate things. Just seeing the people walk around, you get to hear all the conversations in voice. You actually get to feel the emotion of the characters. Because text is a very hard thing to convey when what you're supposed to feel when you're just reading through text. That's not the easiest thing to accomplish. Some people do it
Mm-hmm.
better than others. There are some books that I've read that establish how you're supposed to feel about certain events, but when you actually get to hear it with your own ears and hear the difference in tone and pitch and how people actually voice their lines, that's what makes it so much better. And it was just such a surreal feeling seeing Midgar the way that it is, like just looking up in the sky and you actually get to see all the different machinery and stuff because there's a whole city above the undercity, and it's just like you don't get that with the isometric view of the original. So like you don't get that
Yeah.
perspective of like, holy crap, there's a whole living breathing entity above your head the entire time. So it was definitely a different feeling, I would say.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I don't really have anything to add to it.
Mhm.
I'm glad you brought that up because, yeah, like looking up and seeing as Barrett puts it, the fucking pizza in the sky was awesome, honestly.
Yeah, and it was just a very crazy attention to detail. And like even with the I mean, we are going to touch on this later, but even with like the few aspects of the graphical textures that were a bit off at times, it was still kind of crazy to see just like how much detail there actually was in the world around you.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, and so since that kind of covers our broader scopes, we're now going to break it down. We're going to break down and talk about individual aspects of the game. So first up is gameplay. So what was your overall impression of the gameplay?
So, like I said in my introduction, I played Kingdom Hearts first before I played Final Fantasy VII.
Right.
I had played two other turn-based RPGs before that, but I was so young, like I said, 12.
Yeah.
Uh, to me, I didn't have the brain power or the experience to even differentiate. Like this one, you take turns. This one is action. They're just games to me, right? At that
Mhm.
age. So growing older, I never cared for that distinction. I'll play any RPG. I don't care what its system is. Um, I have less experience with real-time strategy RPGs, or what would you actually call it? Tactical RPGs? Is
Yeah,
that what? Like, yeah,
tactical RPG is usually the typical term.
yeah. I've only spent a little bit of time with that subgenre of RPG,
Mhm.
But to me, it was just like I said, it's comes natural. I'll play either play style. So, um, going out of that, I still haven't. I keep forgetting to verify, but as far as I know, the battle designer for this game is the same as the one for Kingdom Hearts 2. So
Okay.
there are a little bit of similarities, the way the shortcut menu works and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It made that really easy for me to jump into. Um, the way that in it integrates active time battle, where certain actions fill the bar quicker. You can do buffs that build it faster, not just haste. You do a lot of things. I think that there's more complexity in how the ATB system in this game works than the materia system,
Yeah.
and
I could
that's
agree
not
with
a
that.
that's not a slight to the game. It's just that I think, given how far the weapon growth goes and what materia they decided to make available, materia doesn't come off as deep as it does in the original game, for example.
Mhm.
Now, when we get to later points where we've got crazy ATB systems and materia at the same time, it'd be really crazy. And honestly, there's probably crazier stuff in this game that I just haven't experimented with yet.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of materia in my first playthrough I just didn't even bother trying to mess with.
Mm-hmm.
There was just like specific stuff, and it was like that's the stuff I want to use. I don't want to use any of this other stuff because it just doesn't sound like it'd be my play style. Um,
Yeah, and it ends up. I'm gonna make a horrible joke. It ends up being like Dark Souls in a way because you can go back and you can try so many different builds.
yeah,
But
yeah. It's the Dark Souls of Final Fantasy
it's
games.
the Dark Souls of Final. The pull-up game is the Dark Souls of Final Fantasy.
Oh god! Oh
I
god!
stole that joke from
Uh,
the One Punch Man guy on Twitter. I can't remember his
yeah,
name.
isn't it Nibellion or something like that?
Nibellion. Yeah, I
Nibellion,
stole that
yeah.
from Nibellion. But so overall, given my background with how I consume JRPGs or RPGs in general, the system ends up feeling very natural to me.
Mm,
I don't feel that there's a point where I'm not in control unless you get super like wrecked. Like there's a couple of optional bosses that can one shot you or at least put you close to death.
yeah.
And if you're like me and don't think to use the auto revive earrings, that's really hard.
Yeah.
So the point I'm trying to make is that the combat system feels very natural. It doesn't feel unfair.
Mhm.
You have a lot of options. The difficulty comes from two things, in my opinion. It's not using the assess materia to understand what the enemy's weakness is, because sometimes it's not obvious.
Yeah.
Even if you've played Final Fantasy VII, they introduced the wind element in the remake, so there's monsters that are weak to wind that were probably weak to nothing in the original, or they were weak to lightning,
Yeah.
or just one of the other elements. And so you're like, oh, I have to use this wind materia now, but I didn't even want to use it, especially
Right.
because it is the worst spell on top of that, at least in my experience.
Yeah, I didn't have too much success using
Yeah,
the
the
wind
wind
materia.
materia is the only spell that does not track. It creates an area of effect that then detonates. So,
Blizzard does that as well.
but it shoots first and then it expands.
Fair enough.
Wind is just like, hang on, I have to spin, and then it blows up.
Yeah, it's definitely like something that you would probably want to use to like combo like on a staggered enemy or something like that. It would there's probably very specific like scenarios where it's useful. It's just
Right,
like
I
when
see
you're
where
trying
you're
to
coming from.
yeah.
But for example, just quick side tangent, the enemy it's most effective against is the drakes, and they don't sit still.
No, they don't.
You have to use the wind materia to stagger them in the first place.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Also, Jozo says when the staggering mechanic is more fun to work with than it was in Final Fantasy 13 Kappa. Again, we both said this. We haven't played Final Fantasy 13. I have all three games for PS3, and I still haven't touched them. The only one that I've even heard people remotely like was Lightning Returns, because I heard that it's way more focused on just like a central character, and it's a lot easier to get the combat and stuff like that. I think I played the demo of it and I was super spoiled and confused because there's a bunch of crap that carries over from the other two games that I didn't even know what was going on. And then Jozo also mentioned the Hell House. Fuck that boss fight. I hated
that's what I
that
was.
fucking
That's what I was
fight.
getting at. Where the difficulty comes from you not knowing what you're going to need to do.
Yeah.
So as I was saying, the wind element is new. Some people probably aren't going to want to use it because they don't see the point, and then you need it for that fight.
Yeah. You need all four for that fight.
Yeah, you need all four. I generally carry the main three, but now it's like, oh, you need wind too.
Yeah, and I think my wind material was on Tifa at the time or something like that. So I didn't even think to bother putting it on Cloud or Aerith.
On top of that, I had been using Elemental on Cloud, and so for 1 out of 4 modes of the Hell House, I can't hit him.
Yeah.
So whether somebody thinks that's bullshit or cheap or whatever, that's all I can say is that's where the main difficulty comes from, is that there are some enemies that just you're unprepared for, get your ass kicked, but at the same time, it doesn't set you far back. You start literally from right before that fight, reset your equipment, and you go in and you're like, okay, now I know what to do. So it's not like Dark Souls where you have to do a run back, you know?
Yeah, that is very true, and I will say that is one aspect of the game that I actually do like, because there was a situation, it was the first game over I got, was when you're going, it's with Tifa and Barrett, and you're underneath the platform, you're underneath the plate, and you're having to go and you shut down like all the stuff and everything, and you're going through that, and I died, and I was like, well shit, I haven't been taking the time to manual save after every fight, which that made me after every fight start saving more often, but it was super generous in the fact that I just was able to restart exactly from that fight. So I will say that there is definitely some generosity when it comes to the difficulty, even on normal mode. So for me, gameplay wise, like I was really into it. Like you said, like I'm very more familiar with the action oriented RPGs like Kingdom Hearts. And so I really do enjoy that combat. Now, granted, I did have the initial thought that it was going to get stale, that there wasn't going to be enough to keep me invested, because unfortunately, like, your combos don't change, you don't get any sort of additional ways of fighting. Like, that'd actually be a cool mechanic if Cloud developed more stances and things like that. I think that would be a cool little nifty feature to kind of keep the combat more fresh, but there is a lot there that makes the combat stay fresh. Like, you get different weapons and you have different materia setups, and so there's a lot of variety in the way that you can approach different fights. It's not just, oh, you can mash square and you win, because 9 times out of 10, like, for the smaller enemies, yes, but for the vast majority of the game, you're not going to be able to just mash square to win. I mean, the Rufus fight, for example, which, by the way, was fucking awesome. Like, I loved that fight. That fight was really, really fucking cool to me. Especially because it was just like, it was kind of like one of those weird scenarios. Like, I bring it up because I don't know if you've seen it, but have you seen Ego Raptor's sequelitis video on Mega Man versus Mega Man X? Okay. Well, when he's talking about Mega Man X, he explains how the tutorial level basically gives you all the tools to learn and understand how the gameplay and the mechanics of the game are going to work. I felt that way about the Rufus fight. It's like there's enough leeway where you start piecing together like what attacks to start taking advantage of, and like how to deal with certain scenarios. And I really enjoyed that aspect a lot. I learned as I fought, instead of, it wasn't one of those things where I just beat my head against the wall, dying over and over and over again. It was, the fight presented enough opportunity for me to actually learn what I needed to do to progress. So I really do enjoy that aspect. And again, especially when you got all the other characters, when you were able to play as Barrett and when you were able to play as Tifa, and just being able to switch to them on the fly at any given time, that really also makes the variety more fresh because you're obviously not going to always build the characters the same way. While you might want Cloud to be more magic based, you might want Tifa to just be a straight on brawler and she's focused more on just the straight offensive. And while you have Barrett kind of playing support, which I actually did because you don't have Aerith for a good portion of the game, and so it's like Barrett became my support character. So
Yeah, I did the exact same thing with Barrett.
yeah, and so it definitely presents a lot more to keep the freshness of it. I'm sure multiple playthroughs of it. That's kind of why I've refrained from going into like diving into the new game plus and going and picking up all the pieces of the stuff that I missed. Is mainly just because like I didn't want to like overwhelm myself. Like I put 40 something hours into the game. I don't want to just like jump right back in and be like, okay, I'm getting bored with this because I'm just doing the same thing over and over. But for the most part, it really kept me involved. I do like the little aspects for some of the bigger boss fights where there's those, kind of cinematic things where like something in the battle shifts. I really did like that aspect.
I wanted to ask you about that because a lot of people from playing the demo, they felt it was very canned. It's like, but it's a phase shift. All of the major bosses have like 3 to 4 phases where they introduce a small gimmick, and so I wanted to know how you felt about those.
I thought it worked well. Like, and this is coming from the guy who spent hundreds and hundreds of hours in the Dark Souls games, where the latter Dark Souls games basically always, that health bar, you see one health bar? No, that health bar means 2, basically, where the Dark Souls bosses all have some sort of second phase or some sort of gimmick, and 90% of the time they just light themselves on fire, so at least, at least with how Final Fantasy VII Remake works, it doesn't feel like it interrupts the game, or it doesn't feel like it, because you can still approach most of the boss fights the same way that you were. It's not like you suddenly have to change your tactics because now the enemy is 100 times faster than it was before, and it's just going to charge and whatever.
Yeah, I think the fight that did it the best actually was Airbuster.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked that he segmented, and it really made you go, oh, cool. I'm going to send one person after each part and deal with this right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I think out of all the boss fights, that one did the best as far as like, well, every phase I'm going to introduce a gimmick.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I think Genova did it the worst because you're just fighting these tentacles constantly.
Yeah. I will agree with that. And Jozo says, burning dank souls. Burning dank souls.
Before we go on, because I can't remember what video it was. Mm-hmm. It was one of Yempha's Bloodborne videos, and I freaking lost it when he went to do the Witches of Hemwick. He put something like, just kidding, it's a threesome.
Oh, right. Yeah, that dude knows how to get me, because some of the little subtle jokes, he does get me a lot. But like I didn't feel that it took away from the boss fights, because like I feel like if the boss was just one stagnant boss and it only had a certain attack pattern and only did specific things, and nothing ever really changed, or things didn't become dire, like kind of like with the Scorpion guard fight, where the laser is more like can kill you pretty easily if you don't dodge it. I think that adds a lot more flavor to the game. Like I feel like if it had just been, it's one for one exactly how they operated, they have their arsenal from the OG game and that's it, and they don't offer any sort of variation and nothing really changes throughout the fight as you fight them, I feel like that probably would have deterred me more and more from the combat. Now, granted, at the same time, some people who played the original and prefer the turn-based combat might not necessarily have a problem with that, because it's like, I'm familiar with this already, and so they're not going to throw anything at me that's going to make me like lose my shit, right? But to me, it's like, again, with the way that gaming as a whole is now, especially with just the way that like the climate has changed so much, that I think turn-based RPGs are even more niche than they were back in 97. It's just one of those things where I feel that was the way that they needed to approach those fights. And again, they're not like the Dark Souls fights where they just light themselves on fire and call it a day,
You're gonna be so upset when there's a boss in the second part that lights itself on fire.
Lights itself on fire and tears its arm off to smack you.
I wish I had some deep recessed knowledge of Final Fantasy VII bosses. Where like, oh yeah, that's the one that sets itself on fire.
Right.
But
all right,
there
so
might be one.
maybe I don't know. I don't remember every single boss.
If they remix the missing number boss, the boss you have to beat to get the key to get to Vincent, because it's like half blue and half red. I'm like, yes, light the red half on fire, just to piss off Rein.
Oh my god. Yeah, no, well, it's not going to piss me off. It's just going to give me PTSD of it happening so much in Dark Souls.
You're like, Lawrence!
Oh my god. All right, so yes.
Well, there was something I was going to bring up about the bosses. Trying to think right now. I think with adding those elements where it changes a little bit, made the fact that the boss fights are so long a little more digestible. And I think the length of the boss fights are actually pretty good. I like that they don't go down too quick.
Yeah.
And other than the pull up game, what did you think of the mini games?
They were a nice. This isn't saying it as like it's going to be like, I'm not trying to say this being rude. They were a nice distraction.
Okay.
Like it was a nice deviation to break up kind of the monotony. So like, because if it was just back to back where you're just fighting, like, if you fought 5 bosses in a row and then, you had to go from point A to point B and had like 8 fights in between that, and then, you finally progressed in the story, I think that would definitely be like, oh my god, I'm just done with this. Like, I don't want to keep doing this, and definitely not make me want to keep playing. So it was nice when you had those little deviations. It's just like, oh, here's this little optional thing you can do. So it kind of breaks up any sort of monotony. So it's like, oh, I can go do this thing for a little bit and kind of just refresh my gears, for lack of a better term. And that way I can, when I get back to the actual fighting, like, I'm going to want to fight. Like, I'm going to want to actually fight enemies and fight bosses instead of just like, oh, like, I'm sick of that. I wish I could do something else.
Yeah, they kind of make you feel refreshed, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I found it really nice, and how similar or inspired, however you want to put it, the box breaking game, Whack-A-Box, and them putting a Coliseum in the game early, it just screamed Kingdom Hearts to me. And I am all for things that are good about Kingdom Hearts getting put in other games, because I don't want to play Kingdom Hearts anymore. So I thought the Whack-A-Box, it was like, oh, that's kind of like the barrel breaking game in Kingdom Hearts 1.
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, the Coliseum idea isn't original to Kingdom Hearts at all. I think the first game I played that you could go to a kind of Coliseum was Legend of Legaia.
Yeah,
you go to a golden saucer type area, and there's a tournament there.
Well, and I want to say the idea of itself isn't even really original to Final Fantasy. Like, I think that there's been other Final Fantasies that have had that, like, sort of optional, oh, you could go do this little thing where you do constant battles and they get progressively harder. I want to say the Tales of games have a very similar thing. I want to say that there was something like that in Dot Hack too. So it's like, it's kind of not... it mutually exclusive. I mean, probably a very common trope, if you will, in JRPGs as a whole, but I do appreciate when it's there, because it's like, well, instead of like going and just doing the main story and just burning yourself out with the constant battles, here's something that you can, maybe progress to a certain point, but then you hit like a brick wall boss or like a brick wall battle, and you're just like, I can't beat that. So it's like, I come back to it, go do story, level up a little bit, and come back and do that later and approach it even stronger, probably with better tactics.
Yeah, I'd say after about Wall Market, which is chapter 9 halfway point, the game kind of lets you dictate your pace, and
Yeah.
it's really enjoyable at that point because you're like, oh well, I can go and I can do these jobs for people in Sector 5, and then I can go do the Coliseum.
Hmm.
And the other thing about the Coliseum is the rewards were really nice.
Yeah.
They kind of range from like, oh, here's a piece of armor that you might have already, but then they give you limit breaks. So of course you're gonna want to do that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they did.
Especially because the limit system doesn't work the same as it does in the original game at all.
Yeah. Yeah, and that was one thing that I was kind of like, I sort of liked that aspect. It was like you get a much better reward than normal for doing these little side things. It felt you got something that was more, it made you want to do the side thing more or less, like you said.
Yeah,
Which,
in comparison to some more modern games, the side quests didn't feel like a checklist or a chore. You
yeah.
know, um, well, I take that back. I felt that way initially about the stuff in Sector 5, but that was at the point where I was the most upset with the game because I wasn't sure what they were doing with it.
Yeah.
When I replay, I think I'll like it more, especially because the side quests' main purpose, as far as the stuff that are literally labeled side quests in the menu,
Hmm.
it's just to liven Midgar up.
Yeah.
And initially it felt like it was padding, but I like it now. So I don't know. Maybe I'm stupid, but we'll see.
I agree with you, and I think what was neat is, especially with some of the quest givers, them being a little bit more integral to the story, and they actually matter to an extent. It's not just
Right,
this
like
random,
Marl.
yeah, like Marl and Weimer. It wasn't just this random NPC who's like, "Oh, can you go do this thing for me?" It was kind of like most of the side quest NPCs sort of had their own little story, like the teacher, for example, in Sector 5. It's like she makes the mention of like, oh, I gotta go do this thing, after you wrap up the quest. You're like, oh, okay, I wonder what that's all about. And then
I gotta go be a dirty whore.
and then you have just that little meeting with her when you get to Walmart. So yeah, it's just little things like that. Like, it definitely made it seem a lot more alive, and that the things that you're doing actually have purpose, as opposed to just, oh, go kill these 5 enemies, and here's some money, or here's a piece of armor. It actually felt like there was a reason to do all those things.
Yeah,
uh,
like I said, it doesn't feel like a checklist or a chore like it has in some more recent games.
Jozo says Johnny, though. uh, that was
Yuri Lowenthal needs to get the fuck out of my game. Is all I have to say about Johnny.
It would have been better had Johnny been played by Johnny Young Bosch.
Would it have though? Because I would be equally upset.
I don't know. I think it would.
I love
to me,
both
it would
of
laugh.
those guys, but they're in too much shit.
To me, it would make me laugh because it's just Johnny is played by Johnny. So I don't know. Like,
We could make Broly memes out of Johnny if Johnny Young Bosch was voicing Johnny.
Yeah, I guess so.
Johnny's cool, honestly. He was ripe to be expanded upon. Yuri does great. I mean, I'm just cracking jokes because Yuri Lowenthal and Johnny are in fucking everything.
Yeah,
But
yeah, they are. I mean, they are.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Johnny. We'll probably talk about him a little bit more when we get to story if we remember. But the pin in it is that I liked him. Cool. I hope he's in the rest of the other parts.
Jozo says, "Bro, Johnny killed me with his rambling and running fast as fuck." Yeah, he was.
He does run fast. Like when you, I'm trying to remember when he runs from Corneo's all the way to Sam's. That shit's funny.
Yeah, he's a speedy boy, and one of these days when the PC mod comes out, you're gonna hear Sonic music when he runs instead of his footsteps.
or initial D music. He's flashing.
Either or.
Same. Both of them at the same time.
Oh my god, Sonic.
It'll be Brickwalled Green Hill and Brickwalled Deja Vu.
Yeah. Jozo says, "You got the sauce." Oh my god, that was just like a YouTube poop material right there. I hope somebody does something with that. But
They probably will.
Before we divert from gameplay, I wanted to ask, out of all the bosses, what was probably your favorite boss? What was your favorite boss, and what was your least favorite?
Fuck. So least favorite would probably be, I forget the name of it, but the Hojo experiment.
Okay, yeah.
The thing that grabs the tank and then summons a bunch of little monsters.
Yeah.
I just I was very tired at the time, but that's the one that jumps out at me where like I didn't like it. Because Hell House is fine. Other than being surprised, like, oh, you need this one element that you never used. But, I mean, that's a problem. But then my favorite would, I mean, we've got the spoiler tag up and all, but spoilers. My favorite is the final boss, which is Sephiroth.
Yeah, I could definitely understand that. I would probably say, I would say my least favorite. God, I want to say the chariot dude in the train graveyard. I
don't know what his gimmick is. I think you have to cast wind on him, but I really want to analyze him when I replay that mission.
Yeah, it was just the fight that I did not find myself enjoying as much.
And that's what I felt about the Hojo experiment.
The Hojo experiment, I didn't mind so much. The little shits that are all around, like you already dealt with that with Cordeo's fucking big hunk of fuck that's residing in the sewers.
Oh yeah, actually, I'm sorry. I take my pick back. The fact that you have to fight Abs twice.
Yeah,
that's the worst thing about this game.
I think you said that to me when I got up to that point. Yeah, big hunk of fuck. Yes, I said that, Jozo. Yeah, but so that was probably my least favorite was the chariot dude in the train graveyard. The fight before that was actually a lot of fun. When you actually fight like the combination ghost that throws shit at you. That fight was sick. Yeah, and that boss track was fucking killer. But yeah, like probably my favorite fight. I already said it. I really enjoyed the Rufus fight. Like there was just something about that. Like just because it engaged me.
It's because they made Rufus so much more cool.
That's very true. He has a lot. He has a lot of belts. That's a
dude. He's got like 6 pairs of trip pants. Yeah. Been saving them since 2004. But
that he needs more zippers. That he'll be the true.
No. See, Nomura can only go 2 ways. A lot of zippers or a lot of belts. So Rufus goes in the Lulu pile.
Yeah,
for belts, but
that's fair.
No, like if you want to talk about any boss fight that was drastically improved from the original, that's the fight. It wins automatically. That is the most improved fight.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that just with how much it engaged me. It like because I kind of was like, you know, not feeling it at first, but then I was like, oh damn, this fight is really fucking fun once you start to understand how to fight. It's just so much more involved. Like it just felt it was just a change of pace. And I guess you could say the same thing about the Sephiroth fight. I sort of got the same impression of the Sephiroth fight, but I do like the Rufus fight a lot more. And Jozo says, cool guy with a shitty name, deadass.
Yeah, Rufus is a shitty name. But to add a little bit of context, the original Rufus fight, he doesn't even have a special dog with him. He's just got the regular Shinra, whatever dog. I can't remember what they're called right now.
Yeah.
But I think they're called, I know there's a variation that's Bloodhound. Yeah. And they're weak to ice instead of fire. So yeah, he doesn't even have a special dog with him. It dies in like 2 hits. And then you just trade blows with him, I think, for a few turns, and then he pieces.
Yeah.
So for them to soup Rufus up to be a super legit threat, I mean, he's got some agility and everything, but once you stagger him, he can die in 1 hit. Well, 1 limit break anyway. That's how I killed him. I killed him in 1 limit break.
Yeah.
So, like, he's not a super soldier, but it's like, oh man, he's got some shit now.
Yeah, definitely. So was there anything else about the gameplay that you wanted to touch on before we moved on?
I mean, just as far as the Sephiroth fight, just the reasons for why it's my favorite. I mean, yeah, it's grand and it's crazy and it's a final boss and everything, but the attention to detail at the beginning when it's just Cloud and Sephiroth and the sword strikes have the exact same effect as Advent Children.
Mhm.
I was fucking screaming in here at like 1 a.m. Like, I just love that there was that level of consistency, thought to do that much consistency. I don't know what words I'm trying to say, but there was care,
Yeah,
and they made the game, and it was cool.
yeah, absolutely. And I don't have anything else to add, so we're going to move on to the next section, which is the music. And I do have a lot to say about that, but what did you
Well,
feel?
you go first thing because I don't think I have as much to say about the music as you.
Okay. I will say that as an overall soundtrack, I enjoyed it. However, with that being said, there were aspects of it that I didn't enjoy. Like, I felt that there were certain tracks that didn't work the same way that they did in the original, using like the synthesizer style music, like to the orchestral music. Now, granted, I am a huge component of like pretty much all the orchestral music. Like, I play Final Fantasy 14, love the ever loving fuck out of that soundtrack because of that reason. They just they make tracks in that game that just capitalize so much. Like, they have these just really amazing ways that they present the music, and I felt that same way about the music of Final Fantasy VII Remake at certain parts. Like, I loved the boss battle music when you fight the ghost boss. I actually liked the battle track when you fought in the train graveyard. That was probably one of my favorite battle tracks out of them. When Airbusters theme, like how it's the main boss theme from the original redone, that really worked really well. The Genova fight music, it was slow at first. I didn't like it, but when it picks up, when you get to the third phase of the fight and it goes to the original fast paced way that the original song works, phenomenal. Fucking just killer. They nailed it with that. Because that really rejuvenated me and got me more invested in the fight. I was like, "Holy shit, it's getting real now!" because the music got faster. So
Yeah,
um,
it has the exact same effect the way the Genova theme fades in when Cloud goes to fight Kadaj in Advent Children. I feel.
mm, yeah. So, but certain tracks like the Mako Reactor track, I didn't care for it being orchestral. I didn't think it
Me
worked
neither.
the same way. It didn't have the same impact. Um, I know you touched on it, and I'm sure you're going to touch on it. The kind of overuse of Aerith's theme was a bit jarring, to say the least.
Yeah, I would like to go and check myself, but they use her theme a lot, and I, off the top of my head, in the original, that theme only plays during the flashback scene of Aerith's youth, where Elmira is like saying how she came to, you know, be Aerith's surrogate mother and all that. Her
Mhm.
death, obviously. Oh God, spoilers. Wait. Um, her death. No, it doesn't play in the forest scene. Her death. It plays when they basically get like a weird ancient city projector. It plays during that,
Mhm.
and it plays for a little bit during the ending. So there's like off the top of my head, only 4 points that song actually plays in the original, and it played at least 10 times in this version.
Yeah, it felt like every time Aerith was on screen, it played it for a little bit, and that was kind of
Or and they've had multiple versions too.
yeah, yeah, and that was kind of probably another critique is that now, granted, for some people this might not necessarily be a critique, but for me, it's like I can only take hearing the same track just slightly altered so many times, because they do that in the opening mission when you're going to bomb the Mako reactor. The
Well,
battle
they
theme
do it during the
changes.
bosses too.
Yeah,
The boss songs change constantly depending on the phase you're in.
yeah, yeah. No, that I don't mind, because usually the boss
It
theme
just
itself.
escalates it.
Yeah, usually the boss theme itself is like an original composition, but like the battle themes changing as often as they did. While some of them I did like, I didn't like that like in the opening mission, every battle seemed to have like a slight alteration to how the music was portrayed. But as an overall thing, the soundtrack to me is absolutely great. Again, certain aspects I didn't like, but I think it's something that it would definitely be something that I would probably be fine putting on to like my phone or like my iPod or whatever, and being able to listen to it like maybe from start to finish. Not maybe like multiple times, of course, but probably like one of those things where it's like, oh, if I'm in the mood for it, I could probably listen to all of this.
Yeah, I think what really needs to be said, in my opinion, about the soundtrack is that it's amazing that it's as good as it is,
Mm-hmm.
considering I can't talk. Nobuo Uematsu did not work on it. He
Yeah.
picked a guy. He picked somebody who helped him make the original,
Mm-hmm.
but he himself did not work on any of the compositions other than the new theme Hollow that plays during the ending.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um a lot of my opinions just echo yours. I don't like some of the songs being turned orchestral. Like I hate the Guard Scorpion boss theme,
Mm.
but I love Airbuster's version of it. It's the same song. It's Those Who Fight,
Yeah.
but Airbusters has the electric guitar, which, I mean, it's coming out of a PS1 sound chip. You could argue it's not a guitar on the original, but I mean, it's trying to sound like a guitar.
Right.
So I much prefer Airbuster's theme. Um, a lot of the new songs I did like, though. I haven't been able to find it yet, but the song that plays at the beginning of chapter 17, when you're in Aerith's room at Shinra Tower,
Mm-hmm.
that song is beautiful. And that was not in the original game. That's a new song.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some others sprinkled out. None that I can remember off the top of my head, because
Mm-hmm.
I think me and you both took our time with the game as much as we could, but there is some of it that is a bit of a blur.
Yeah. That is
But
fair.
I did at least try to go and listen to some of the tracks last night. I have two questions for you. The first one is, what did you think of the Wall Market theme?
I thought it was okay. It reminded me because it changes when you first are there at night, and then when you go during the day, it
Mm-hmm.
changes, doesn't it? Um,
It's a little bit more relaxed. It's not as like, oh, there's a party.
yeah, I thought it fit the theme because I've always kind of imagined Wall Market to sort of be like the Vegas Strip in a way. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
Vegas Strip of Final Fantasy VII, so it fit how it should be. Um, so I didn't necessarily have an overall issue with it.
My only issue is that it's one of the few areas where the soundtrack was completely replaced. That's not the original Wall Market theme in the least bit.
Yeah.
If it is, and I'm just not hearing it proper, they did a lot of crazy. They reorchestrated it pretty strangely.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you're in Wall Market longer than any other area in the game, and so
Yeah.
that song got a little grating to me.
Yeah. That's completely understandable.
Because you're there from chapter 9, and then what is it? 10, 11, and 12 is sewers, train graveyard, tower. What is chapter 13?
Uh,
Chapter 13 just the Rhino fight?
I can't remember actually. Because I chapter 14 is when you actually get the
Oh,
free
no.
roam of going.
Chapter 13 is where you're searching for the Sector 7 survivors.
Oh, okay.
So 13 is where you go into the underground lab.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it's like all of that stuff happens kind of fast, and then you're back in Wall Market.
Mm.
So you're there for a lot of the game, and that song wore on.
Yeah.
My other question then is, which from hearing the original soundtrack, which do you think was redone the best?
That's tough for me actually. Because it's kind of one of those things where like even though some of the redone orchestral versions of the tracks are good, they kind of stand separate as their own thing instead of being like, oh, they were trying to make it sound or kind of capture how it felt when you heard it in the original. So to me, I would say it would be very difficult to say which one. If I were to say any of them, probably my vote would go to the Airbuster fight because
Mm-hmm.
it sounded closest to the original track, and then I would say probably the Genova fight would probably follow up that.
I remember saying you were jamming out to the music that plays in the Sector 6 underpass.
Oh yeah, that track it hit a nostalgia nerve for me because it sounded like it belonged in Threads of Fate, which is funny because
Yeah, that's what you said.
that's another Square IP, and it's something that I definitely, if they were to ever remake it, I would want it redone in the same style as Final Fantasy VII Remake, because it was already an action RPG, so just amplifying the action of it would be phenomenal, and just to see it in a new light. So, but it definitely had a very similar flow and aesthetic to the Threads of Fate soundtrack.
Yeah, because I really liked that song too. Um, I should have researched more song names. There's a song that plays if you go from Wall Market towards Sector 5.
Mm-hmm.
They did a really good job on that song. Tifa's theme is done really well because it lends itself to being done by an actual orchestra.
Yeah.
But then as for like super top picks, Genova as well and Airbuster. And my surprise pick is actually the music that plays during the bike chase. They did a really good job amping that song up.
I could see that.
The pick I'll have to reserve because I was concentrating on the fight, and I'll have to go back and listen to it, is the new version of One Winged Angel as well.
Yeah, I was kind of more focused on the fight too, so I'll definitely have to
The
go
only
listen
thing
to
I can
that on
say
its own.
about that that was really cool is the choir for that version is actually singing at the very beginning of the game. So they use the music to immediately put this like cloud of Sephiroth. He's over the whole game this time.
Yeah.
And I feel like the themes that they associate with Sephiroth, which is the new One Winged Angel, and I forget the name of the track, but his actual original theme that's just the dun with the heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
They did a really good job of using those two tracks as storytelling elements. That's how you knew immediately. It's like Jason's showing up, you know?
Yeah.
Or some shit. You're like, oh man, it's about to go down.
Right.
So, and the fact that they opened the game with it in hindsight, you're like, oh, okay, damn, Sephiroth's a problem for the whole game now. Not just after the first 10 hours, like the actual whole fucking game.
Yeah. I mean, they do kind of establish that pretty early on, especially after the bombing mission.
Right. Yeah, they really do. But to do it in such a subtle way, I have to commend it.
Yeah, for sure. So before we moved on to the next portion, did you have anything else to, like, any final notes about the music that you wanted to add?
The fucking Squats theme is the best.
God, dude, I no, that is, so you talking about how Wall Market's theme grinded on your gears, me doing the fucking pull-up game, that track grinded on my gears after a while, to the point where I didn't even, I took my headphones off and I put my earbuds in. I started listening to other shit because I was like, no, I am not going to beat this because this track is just pissing me off.
Oh, I'm so sorry that took you so long.
Dude,
I'm glad you did it though.
Collectively 3 hours for me. It took my buddy 5. Shout out to Brandon in the IAS, man. Like, I feel his pain. I told him as soon as I got in the call, I was like, dude, I know exactly what you fucking went through when you made that tweet about fuck this mini game. I felt it. So I knew exactly. Oh my God.
Well, as long as they don't make you do a fucking bench press against Dio at Gold Saucer. Not JoJo's Dio. There's a character named Dio who runs Gold Saucer. I don't think we'll have anything so horrible.
Yeah, hopefully not. Hopefully not. Okay. I don't have anything else to add about the music, so we are going to move on to our next subcategory, the graphics. I already kind of touched about this, but I'll let Xanthan go ahead first, since I went ahead and already kind of briefly mentioned my thoughts on certain elements of it.
Yeah, I think the muddy textures in certain parts are they don't take me out of the game.
Hmm.
Um, but at the same time, you're playing. So for like just to completely understand it, to complain about those textures, like really put it into perspective. This whole ass game used to look like how horrible those textures on the posters look. And I love how the original Final Fantasy VII looks, but to say that it's not a low poly, low res game is lying,
Yeah.
you know? So it doesn't bug me at all. It didn't distract me. It's just kind of like, oh, huh, this poster is kind of ugly, or like, oh, this piece of grass, or whatever. There's a lot of certain parts. And, with all the things we know now about how horrible life can get working on a title this big,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
how many hours these devs put in. I'm, unless we're dealing with something like the Assassin's Creed remaster where people's faces disappear,
Mhm.
like I'm not really going to complain.
Yeah.
Um, but moving on to more positive things, uh, this has kind of been said by everyone, but I think they really perfected the balance of photorealism and anime aesthetic,
Mhm.
for lack of a better term. They really perfected it in this game, I feel,
Mhm.
because Cloud's hair isn't too flat, but it isn't Goku hair.
Yeah.
You know, nobody's eyes are really too realistic looking.
Mhm.
Um, Barrett's proportions, he didn't skip leg day like he did in the original. So I think they just perfectly freaking nailed it with the designs. The architecture of the city is perfect.
Mhm.
Um, I think they did an even better job making the poor areas look poor. As somebody
Yeah.
who lives in a very poor state, not just my own city, but like the whole state is poor.
Mhm.
So it's like we know what a fucking poor place looks like. And I
Right.
think I think Sector 7 and 5, it really looks realistic as a poor area, as a slum.
Yeah.
Um Then there's things like the attention to detail. I mean, I won't obsess about it too much, but the fact that literally every weapon you can see materia slots in,
Yeah.
that's fucking amazing.
Oh, absolutely. That.
Because, you would see it in a couple promo arts, but you can see it in all of Barrett's guns. It's in all of Tifa's gloves. You can see it on Red 13's collar.
Mhm.
It's freaking awesome. And they're on Aerith's staffs too, but it's just so hard to see because her weapon isn't as visible as the other characters.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that attention to detail just blew me away. I mean, I can't really be like, wow, it was so good because that's the only thing that hasn't slipped on Square Enix.
Mhm.
Is the graphics have always gotten better.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'll say it looks better than 15, and 15 looks amazing, but I
Yeah.
think this game looks even better. Um, yeah, I mean, I just can't really go into detail about it because it's just such a broad thing. It looks good.
Yeah. And for me, it's like, I'm one of the lucky few who got to experience. Now, granted, I didn't grow up with the NES, but I have distinct memories of the Super Nintendo, and I've got to see the evolution of how graphics have come along. So, you know, when the textures are a bit muddy at times, in Final Fantasy 7R, that doesn't bug me to the extent that it might bug some people who are all about that. Oh, you got to have the best of the best graphics. It's got to, it's got to look the part. I've got to have
Hmm.
this custom rig that runs everything at ultra high def. It's like,
Right,
it,
and I guarantee you, when the PC version comes out,
oh,
either
I know.
Square will have fixed that, or the community will fix it.
Oh yeah, exactly. And I'm more than sure that it'll look probably 10 times better at ultra settings on PC.
Hmm.
There's a limit to how what consoles can output. Now, granted, the PS4 Pro does benefit, and I do know Final Fantasy 7R benefits from the Pro mode that's on the
Hmm.
PS4 Pro. I don't know to the extent because I never play with that mode off. So it's one of those things where it definitely have to be something I'd have to compare and contrast, like side by side, see like, oh, this is what it looks like in Pro mode. This is what it looks like when it's not in Pro mode. But
Right, and it's difficult to remember, but the PS4 is 7 years old now,
yeah, I
so.
mean, it's that's crazy. It's crazy that it's so old. But for me, it's just I was blown away by the graphics. I thought, how cool is it that now, because this is something that like in my head, like I imagine if they were to do a Legend of Dragoon remake, it's something that I would really love to see is that the weapons change when you equip the different weapons. Not only do they change in the broad world, but most of the cutscenes, since they're in game rendered,
Yeah.
they change in the cutscenes as well. And so I think that is just awesome to see because it's like now you actually get to see the aesthetic of the weapon that you're choosing instead of just, oh, Cloud always has the Buster Sword, oh, Barrett always has the Gatling gun. It's like now if you really wanted to see Barrett talking to people and hunkering down people with the wrecking ball, it's like when he's got people by the he's grabbed them and everything like that, and he's like, your head's gonna come off, and he's like pointing a wrecking ball at him. It's like now you can see that, and I think that's a really cool aspect of the game, probably one of the best aspects of it when it comes to the graphics. But I just feel like, and I touched on this earlier, just the feeling of how they captured everything. Like you said, the slums look like poor people live there. The houses are made are cobbled together out of various, pieces of metal and things like that. They don't look like something that like any sane person would want to live in. You run through these, junk heap areas that are infested with monsters, so you can see remnants of where people lived, and and just like all these different little aspects of it. And then again, just looking up to the side and seeing the underside of the plates, and they actually look like these just giant, mechanical messes. And then like even like the whole thought about like, because originally like when it turned daylight, like because like it starts out at night, and then you sleep and then you wake up in Sector 7 and it's daylight. I was like, oh, that is super cool. You actually get to see like day to night transitions. Like that's really cool. And then like even their explanation about that the sun that they is fake, that they're using these big lights to emulate the sun for the
Yeah,
underside of the
that's
city.
that's
Like,
just such an amazing that's such an amazing piece of the world building,
mhm.
because of the static camera angles. You had really no concept of what time of day it was in Midgar.
Yeah.
You just kind of always assumed that, okay, maybe the sun is blocked out due to the plate and then the smog on top of that, and there's never really any sun. Like,
Mhm.
that's kind of how it comes across in Crisis Core. But I guess now it's just kind of implied that any scene in Midgar and Crisis Core is at night.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was just to me like it was a trip to see what the devs are able to do. Like it's such a testament to like you look at the original game and like I mean it's a night and day difference. But you look and see like because I always bring it up because I think it's funny. Like I used to think that when the N64 and the PlayStation 1 came out, like that was it. Like, oh my God, the graphics are so realistic. You're looking at like dudes whose hands don't even, look like freaking hands. They look like squares and they look like shapes as opposed to actually having articulate fingers. But now you skip forward to now and just all these years later, and we've made such huge advancements um, in our technology that we can have graphics that almost they really captivate you to the point where you feel like you're there, you're experiencing everything, as if you're there, like it feels alive. And I think that's a really, really hard thing, to capture in most instances. So just for them to have been able to do it is just freaking mind numbing. And I also do want to kind of touch on like the character redesigns. I,
Yeah, I wanted
uh,
to ask you about that too.
yeah, um, I personally don't have any issues with them. Like I thought Barrett looked fine. I thought Tifa looked fine. Like I know everybody flipped the shit about, oh, she's got an undershirt on now. So what? She still looks amazing and she fits the part. She's still Tifa. Like just because her outfit changed slightly from the original outfit, it didn't take it didn't take away who she was as a character. Like her
Mm-mm.
outfit everything that they did with the characters' outfits just complements the way that the world is. And I think it works, even just the subtle changes to, Aerith's outfit. Like, obviously, hers is probably the one that hasn't been touched hardly. And I mean, Cloud's to an extent hasn't. Obviously, just the color has been changed because, like, as you explained to me, it was kind of retconned and changed throughout
Mm-hmm.
the years what the color represents. And so, other than that, I mean, it felt apart. And even like when you get to the point where you meet Red 13, and I was just dumbfounded how he looked. I was like, wow, he just like, damn, they did him good. Like he looks so good, you know.
Yeah, I mean, if you compare it to his concept art, it's pretty similar, but I think just due to the amount of fidelity, I think it's interesting that he looks emaciated.
Mhm.
Because if you go off of Before Crisis, he's been in Hojo's lab years.
Yeah,
So he is starved in there. So I think it's really interesting that, I mean, he could just be like a fit, whatever he is, but
yeah,
I think he looked a little bony. And I think that's a neat detail, if that's their intention. If not, oh, he's just skinny, I guess. But
yeah. Yeah, so I,
uh,
I, I definitely felt that everything just kind of meshed well together. I didn't see any glaring issues aside from the few graphical hiccups that the game obviously had, like things not rendering in properly or something like that, which that could easily be fixed. It could just be
mhm.
optimized over time and just be a more enjoyable experience. Other than that, I was just dumbfounded by everything. Like it made me want to just like screenshot the whole game.
Yeah, I actually only took a couple
Same.
screenshots, and the screenshot I took was when you reach the plate
Mm,
after Sector 7 has fallen, when you get to the upper city.
yeah.
I just had to take a screenshot of that. Um, to jump in on the designs, um, like I had said, that the balance between anime style and photorealistic is really good.
Mm,
Uh, Nobody's outfit has been changed to an offensive degree. Like, of course she would put shorts on Tifa, right?
yeah.
She's in a fully 3D rendered game where you can't control how the player is going to manipulate the camera.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, they didn't in Dissidia, but different time, I guess. Um, uh, what was I going to say? To touch on one individual design that I really enjoyed. It's very minimal, but I feel like Sephiroth having that one extra little belt brings him that much closer to looking like his original concept art before. um well, I wouldn't say original, but the way that Yoshitaka Amano, who is the primary he was the primary what would you call that type of art, promotional art
Hmm.
guy at Square. He was the guy that they would contract to do promotional art, and he's the guy that draws all of the older logos where they've got like the wispy lines and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And his Sephiroth had that belt. So I thought that was really nice that they put Yoshitaka's his personal design piece on Sephiroth.
Yeah.
Um so I thought that was really cool. The the way they made Sephiroth look so sinister at all time.
Yeah.
Like he looks well, I don't even know if demonic would be the right word, but he looks fucking scary.
Yeah.
And the way that they've kind of placed and modeled his hair, it looks a little closer to the polygonal model from the original. It's it just the way his face is framed with everything really sells how sick he is, I think.
Yeah.
And in a similar vein, I think they did the same with Hojo.
Oh God, yeah.
I
They
mean, that's
nail.
helped by how they've changed his dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
But graphically, like you look at him and you're like, man, that dude's a pervert.
Yeah, like that's all I got from like the way that his face is structured. Like you can see that he's just this old demented dude, that he's just like fucking out of his mind, and it's like they nailed that with his presentation. I really appreciated that because it made me hate him. You know?
Yeah. And the only other thing I have to mention graphically, just to put a finer point on, when I said it looks better than 15, I don't know why 15 was this way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so many things that happened during its development, but when you play 15, especially for a longer amount of time, and you start doing all the side quests, the party looks freaking weird next to the NPCs, because the NPCs kind of look like they came out of a GTA game.
Yeah,
they look like regular ass people,
very casual.
And then the Backstreet Boys show up. So you're like, it's just jarring. And I felt like while the Sector 7 people, they look very realistic like normal people, there's something about 7's character designs for the main cast that don't make them as jarring to look at side by side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with you. Like it was kind of that weird thing, because I even had that sort of thought. I was like, man, these people were kind of cool with just, you know, Cloud with his huge ass sword and freaking his big brother freaking Barrett, you know, with his big ass gun arm, just howling around and, you know, walking through the streets like it's no big deal. Like there's a very sharp contrast where it's like they definitely pop out from just the normal run of the mill people who are living in the slums.
Right. Yeah. But they don't look as jarring as 15.
Yeah. Still have yet to play 15. I need to.
You might be very disappointed after playing this one. That combat system will be hard to go back to after this one, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Great story, though. Yeah. I mean, maybe not one of the best Final Fantasy stories ever, but it's a cute, emotional story.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we've touched on pretty much everything we've had to say about graphics, unless you have any final points to add.
No, I don't think so. The only other thing I could say, and it's more related to them just staying true to the original game's design, I do like that there's still a lot of the Japanese signs all around Megara, especially in Wall Market. Mm-hmm. Mostly because they're a little bit easier to read. So now I know, like, oh, that's what this sign's supposed to be about.
Right. Yeah, I could understand that. Mm-hmm. And I myself don't think I have anything to add. I think I touched on everything I wanted to say about that. So now we're moving on to probably the section that we're going to spend the most time on, the story. So I want to ask you, my friend, what did you think of the story as a whole, and where are you feeling in regards to all of the elements that they added and changed about the story?
Well, I'll try not to rant for too long. Please interrupt me if you have a question or if you want to butt in.
Oh, absolutely. No problem.
Because this is the one thing that I haven't been able to hold back from talking to other people about, mostly because they're coming to me. Mm-hmm. I've had 3 of my friends come and ask, like, hey, what did you think of this? And so initially playing, I had to keep repeating the mantra of the original still exists.
Yeah.
I wanted to be as open to change as possible. But my perspective on a majority of the changes as they were happening was I don't like it because it comes across as bullshit fan service.
Mhm.
It had me going, well, they decided to make it who knows how many games. So instead of just holding off, they're like, oh, well, I mean, we've got to show Eris dying as a little, as a little tease. We've got to show Meteor falling.
Mhm.
And I was upset about all of that until the very end. So that plays back into how I was saying I feel that this game is additional material to 7.
Mhm.
I personally feel that this game cannot be played by somebody who has not played the original game.
Mhm.
You don't have to play all of the compilation. Crisis Core would help, but you cannot go, hey, you haven't played Final Fantasy VII before, jump on with this game.
Yeah.
You absolutely cannot, because with the twist that is revealed, that twist being that the Whispers, who are the Dementor-looking beings, the swirly ghosts,
Mhm.
they have been preventing story deviations for the whole game. So without you knowing the original Final Fantasy VII story, at least in passing, you will not understand the gravity of what these new characters, which are basically physical manifestations of destiny, you will not understand the gravity of what they're doing.
Right.
So that's why I feel so strongly that it's like it's additional.
Mhm.
How did you feel before the ending about some of the things? Because I think it's important to mention, like, Rein called it from the first fucking scene where they flashed forward. He's like, "This is an alternate universe,"
I had
and
a
he was
hunch.
right, in my opinion.
I had a hunch, and so to answer that, because I kind of have to give a little bit of backstory to why that was my immediate assumption, because there is a lot of media that I consume, a lot of video games that I play that delve into time repeating itself or alternate timelines being a very prominent factor as part of the main overarching story. Prime example of that, Fate the Umbral Star delves into the idea of timelines. You basically get to the experience of the game. You play more or less the same story from 3 different perspectives, but they're each a separate timeline where things didn't pan out the way that they were supposed to, so the timeline ended, and then it all culminates into one timeline that continues, hence why there's a sequel. So with media like that, I already have some of the preconceived notions of like cues, because one thing, and this is something, even to try not to rant for too long, but this is something that when I write my own material, when I write my own stories, this is something that I mention a lot, because that's also an aspect of a lot of things and a lot of characters I create is that they get these sort of, like, if you will, messages and these little flashes of what transpired before in another timeline. So it's this whole concept of these characters I write about are typically trying to prevent that from happening and reoccurring. So I already have this kind of crazy notion of like, oh, these little subtle hints are going to tell me more or less whether or not this is going. And it basically, like, when the first flash of Cloud having the preconceived notion where he sees Aerith's death, it's like, okay, well, why would he have a flashback of that if that didn't happen yet?
Mm-hmm.
There is some suspense of disbelief. Now, at the beginning, it could be something like, oh, it's the Mako, or the live stream, the planet itself could be communicating like this is gonna happen, and so that's why he's seeing it. But then you get these weird ghosts called the Whispers, and once they explained what those creatures and those entities were designed for and what their purpose was serving, because throughout the whole game up until that point, it was really one of those things like, what the hell is this edition? Like, why is this
Yeah, I felt
why
the same way.
why is this a thing that these creatures exist and they're doing this weird stuff? They show up when people die. They showed up when, and we assumed prevented Wedge from surviving the Sector 7 collapse. So it's just kind of like this notion of like, okay, well, what the hell is their deal when they're explained that there's these arbiters of faith making sure that events transpire as they're supposed to. It's like,
Mhm.
well, obviously that's not the case, because some of these characters, like Wedge, for example, did not die. And as the ending showed, Biggs is still alive. How the hell he survived is beyond me, but the fact of the matter is, and I ain't gonna lie, it got me in the heartstrings seeing that he was still alive, because that,
Same.
especially as we kind of mentioned before, with the way that the characters are voiced and everything like that, and just these overall, especially during his and Jesse's, quote unquote death sequences, it's way more emotional. And because I grew attached to those characters, because it's like they gave them such distinct personalities, and you just feel the way that they are through their dialogue, and the way that the voice actors were able to convey what they had to say, and so it was just one of those things. And it was kind of not it it's not an unwelcome aspect, because it can be kind of viewed like that Square wanted to play it safe, I guess, if you will. It's like they wanted to add more story, they wanted to add these extra elements, but putting it as, oh, this is all happening in an alternate timeline, I think kind of softens the blow for a lot of those people. As you were saying, the OG still exists. And so
Mhm.
that way, there isn't this overarching feeling of like, oh, we're completely changing the original and you're just going to like it. It's like, oh, look, you could still like the original and how it, like that material goes, but here's an alternative material if you wanted something different.
Right.
I'm
To
sorry if I
pre-
didn't answer your question.
No, no, you. I honestly can't remember what the question was. um, because I just started thinking like there's a couple prefaces I should have given. One, there's so much to unpack that I think there's no choice but to jump around
Yeah.
about discussing the story.
Hmm.
And two, everything that I feel about this, about what is shown, to me seems obvious.
Hmm.
Um, and feels like it's very to the point, not too mystifying. But I have nothing than what's shown in the game. I have
Hmm.
no evidence that things are going the way that I feel them.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I could say, and I'm not trying to gloat or anything, is just that I have evidence for what I'm saying, whereas others they they have personal interpretations.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to be as unbiased as possible. I sound like an asshole no matter how I say this, but I'm just trying to say like I we don't know if it's going to go the way that I feel it's going to,
Hmm.
but it seems to point in that direction.
Yeah.
So, um, just to prop them up a little bit more, the voice acting in this game is amazing.
Yes. Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
actually think that Jesse was the best voice actor in the whole game, but everyone was freaking amazing.
Yeah.
I think it's 50% big credit to Square's writing, and the other 50% to the voice actor's performance. They made you care about Biggs, Jesse, and Wedge with one chapter.
Yeah.
The way that they were talking about it leading up to this, I thought you were going to have to spend 3 or 4 chapters with these characters.
Yeah.
But they did such a good job
Hmm.
of just making you care about characters that were barely in the original. And I think
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
As for the kind of conflicting evidence, okay, so the Whispers are apparently supposed to make sure that the timeline goes the way that it was originally intended.
Hmm.
You could argue that any of those 3 living is 100% inconsequential to the major plot of Final Fantasy VII.
Right.
Because in the original Final Fantasy VII, you only revisit Midgar once in the storyline. There's optional stuff you can go do, but you only revisit it once, and you don't even go into the slums. Where we know Biggs at least is there. Wedge may have been killed in Shinra Tower. We don't know.
Yeah.
And we don't know where Jessie is.
Yeah.
Considering she was the one that was highest up in the tower, I think she's fucking dead, but
yeah,
we'll see.
We'll see. I mean, you know, spiritual magical bullshit is not outside the realm of Final Fantasy, so
yeah,
it'll definitely be interesting, because I'm even curious with just how Big survived, because he was on that same
right,
tower.
because he was in the middle of the tower too.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, the scientist in me is like, well, I mean, you know, he was unconscious, his muscles weren't tense, he could have survived the fall because of that reason, you know, but you know, that's trying to put logic in a non-logical scenario. So, you know, it is definitely going to be interesting going forward how they explain that, and if Wedge and Jessie are still alive.
So, you know, there were minor changes that I either didn't see what the gravity of them was going to be initially, or just didn't care. Like, for example, I wasn't too upset about Cloud initially being forced out of the second bombing mission. I was like, whatever. You know, went and did the stuff in Sector 7. I was like, that was pretty cool. And then the Whispers show up, and you're just like, what the fuck? Yeah. You know, why are these things here? What are they doing?
Right.
And they show up again during the plate collapse, and you're like, what the fuck are they doing? So it's such a crazy light bulb moment when he says, you know, when he's like, well, they make sure that things are supposed to go the way that they're supposed to go.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you think really deeply about it, the first time you see them, they're like harassing Aerith. And it's because Cloud isn't paying attention to her, and he's supposed to talk to her.
Yeah.
So he goes and talks to her, but then they talk too long. So the Whispers gotta like scare her off.
Yeah.
The next time you see them is in Sector 7. They end up having to hurt Jessie to make sure that Cloud has to go on the mission.
Yeah.
So that Cloud meets Aerith. So that Aerith doesn't get captured by Reno. You know? So I love stories that are like that, when they can drop finally that one little piece of information you need and it all clicks.
Yeah.
And that was the thing that made me go, okay, I am not upset that this whole game was in Midgar.
Yeah.
Without jumping too far ahead, once you finally get to the whole ending, that made me go, I am 100% down with this being multiple games.
Yeah.
Because Square knew two things. They knew that Final Fantasy VII was the one product they could not half-ass.
Yeah.
Not that they half-assed any of the other remakes or remasters. But they knew that they couldn't just go slap new graphics on it, release it, print money.
Yeah.
They know that this game is too important. So they, regardless if they want to use this as a vehicle to completely alter the story, which I don't think they're going to do, they knew that they had to create a level of intrigue for people who have already played it to make us want to play and buy the other parts, to make it justified. And the fact that they took a whole game to set that up earns my respect, because if in trailer 1 they were like, welcome back to Final Fantasy VII, but it's different this time, it's like, you would have told them to get the fuck out of here. So, where was it that I left off before I asked you the question? I think I was in the middle of of like the whisper, you know, mic drop, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's right. That sounds about right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to get into it on this podcast. The only other thing that still upsets me about this interpretation of events is Cloud's cross-dressing. It's just too tonally different, you know? And if people want the tea on that, they can talk to me themselves. But there was, after that point, there was no change that I was really upset with. Even chapter 14, which I told you I thought was the worst chapter in the game, it's whatever, because now it's like, okay, they've really facilitated the room to put these new recurring characters in, like Leslie.
Yeah.
So, moving on, the evidence that I feel is in the game, or rather, not the evidence, what I feel that the answer is, or what it's pointing towards, and I can get into the evidence later if you want to ask me. I mean, on the podcast, of course, but like, I feel that it is pointing towards the fact that Sephiroth and possibly Aerith are the same characters from the original game that have moved to a new timeline or universe, or they could make something up, you know, some crazy Norse mythology thing.
Yeah.
I believe they are the same characters. They have full knowledge of what has happened in their entire lives in the original series. And past that, because they both continue to exist within the live stream. So, upon getting to this dimension or time traveling backwards, whatever Sephiroth has done, he immediately seeks to torment Cloud.
Yeah.
Mostly because he's a sadist and he fucking hates Cloud. Because, I mean, Cloud is literally the only reason he has ever stopped.
I mean, Cloud did sort of yeet him into the into the ether.
Yeah, so, like, Cloud is literally the consistent thorn in his side, you know, because he killed Aerith. He stopped Holy. But Cloud is the one who physically and spiritually destroyed him.
Yeah.
Though, obviously, with what I'm saying, Sephiroth is still spiritually alive and has somehow done something to get to a new timeline. He is just too knowledgeable too early in the game for it to just be fan service. Yeah. One of the points that really stuck out to me after finishing the game is that after the initial hallucination where he makes himself known, when Cloud notices Aerith, Sephiroth appears and he like puts his hand on her shoulder and walks past, or he puts his hand on Cloud's shoulder. I'm not positive. He touches somebody. But he specifically says to Cloud, "You're too weak to protect anyone."
Yeah.
Why would he say that with Aerith being right there?
Yeah.
If he didn't know what he's already done.
And to kind of further jumping ahead a little bit to add to this point, I mean, it kind of also explains in the ending sequence when him and Cloud are sitting on that rock, like out in space. I assume somewhere on the edge of like the galaxy where Gaia exists, and for him to offer Cloud the chance to join him, it's like, why would he harass him the whole game, and then at this 1 second, one segment, offer the chance to fight alongside him to quote unquote, break destiny, if you will, because that's what he says. He wants to fight against it like they do. And so, it's kind of like, if he didn't have preconceived notions of what happened in the previous material up to, Advent Children, and I don't know how influential any of his arc, if you will, is in Dirge of Cerberus, but
non-existent.
Okay, so up to Advent Children, so it's like, obviously, if he had preconceived notions of what happened in another timeline, to offer Cloud a chance to break that sort of mold, because if in theory that would start a whole new timeline, if Cloud was like, all right, you know what, screw it, I'll join you, let's fight together. So it is definitely something I think is very heavily implied, that I don't necessarily agree that Aerith is 100% knowledgeable. but there is some stuff that does, I would say, like when she does the whole spiritual, oh, let's open a doorway to this other dimension using whatever power this is, because they don't explain how she did that, so
Right, and
it's,
she has no similar feats in the original game.
yeah.
She's basically like the most she can do power wise is she can speak to the dead,
Hmm.
which all of her race can do. So,
But yeah, I definitely do feel that maybe not as heavily as Sephiroth. She definitely at least has an inkling about what transpired before, but I don't think she might understand it fully. But then again, I don't know. We only have the one game to go off so far, and only just certain aspects that definitely hint that she is knowledgeable in events that transpired. But we'll have to wait until we get to the more crucial elements of her character and parts of that story to finally know, because I think you sort of implied it, but if I were to assume you believe, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you could correct me if I'm wrong, but do you believe that when the other games come out that Aerith will not meet the same fate, that she will not be killed by Sephiroth?
no, and the whole reason why,
Mm-hmm.
um, this is one point that I don't really have a lot of evidence for,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like that entire development staff would do a disservice to the game
Mm-hmm.
if they let her live. And it's not just because, like, whoa, shocking moment. No, her death is so important to the whole theme of the damn game
Yeah.
that you can't get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, the really only reason I brought up that she knows what happens is there's just a couple of really freaky points. The first one, when she goes to get Marlene from the bar, she hugs
Yeah.
Marlene and the screen shakes.
Yeah, it does the whole like memory, like when
Yeah,
Cloud's having
and
his
all she
headaches.
does is wink at Marlene and tells her to be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't say that points towards anything other than it being weird and it
Yeah.
being associated to Cloud's memory issues. It's the same. It's the same visual effect.
Yeah.
The other thing, and I know that you did not get this scene because
Oh, right. There's
there's a
branching.
girlfriend meter in the game again, and so at the start of chapter 14, depending on what your affection ratings are, you can get a scene with Tifa, you can get a scene with no one, or you can get a scene with Aerith.
Mm-hmm.
If you get the scene with Aerith, it's a vision because she's already at Shinra Tower at this point.
Yeah.
And Cloud's talking to her, and he's like, "Yeah, I want to save you." And they kind of, do some back and forth. And at the end of it, what Aerith says is that no matter what, you cannot fall in love with me. Your feelings are not real.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she does a similar call out on Cloud if you get her as a date in the original game at Golden Saucer.
Mm-hmm.
She just keeps mentioning that she wants to meet the real Cloud. And that's your first really big, like, what the fuck do you mean moment.
Yeah.
But for her to say something so blatant that, because one, if Cloud never falls in love with Aerith, regardless if that's his Zack side falling in love with Aerith or
Mm-hmm.
not, regardless if it's that side of him, if she can keep him from caring about her so much, he will not be so grief stricken after the fact
Mm-hmm.
because she knows she's going to have to die.
Yeah, and that was actually something that I was actually going to touch on when you said it. It could be that if Aerith is knowledgeable about her death and it being an unavoidable effect, it could be very much like that she could prepare the party for being aware, being ready when that happens. But even at the same time, it could also have the same sort of wanted effect that she knew it was going to happen, but obviously Cloud, Tifa, and Barrett don't understand that they are not their former selves in any sense of the word. They are not the physical manifestation of a former version of themselves. So it could be something as even Cloud could still feel the same amount of grief because they might go on this whole journey to defy fate, but that was the one unavoidable encounter that he couldn't defy regardless of what he did, and so it could still have the same emotional impact that even though he's aware that this event is going to occur, that he still couldn't stop it.
Yeah, and I think if I'm correct, and this is the same Aerith that knows everything that's going to happen, to an extent, so this might get a little complicated, but she talks a lot about like, well, if we go through here, we've got to defy fate.
Yeah.
When you go to do the final fight, when you go to fight the Whisper bosses and then Sephiroth later.
Yeah.
I could see some people interpreting that as, well, no, she wants us to help fight against our fate and all of that. That whole part near the end, from the people I've discussed it with, they got very confused by that part.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're told blatantly the Whispers are there to prevent deviations of the original story from happening.
Mm-hmm.
So what is the major deviation at this point? Sephiroth is there. He's not supposed to be.
Yeah.
If we go off of the original game, Sephiroth's body is in Northern Cape for the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
He is using his will to possess Jenova, who is inside the Shinra building, and use her shape-shifting ability to portray Sephiroth. And specifically in Remake, we're shown that the clones can do this. The clones are the men in black cloaks that have numbers tattooed on them.
Yeah.
They were never shown in the original game to be able to take the form of Sephiroth, but it's specifically Marco from the beginning of the game that stabs Barrett, which not supposed to happen. Sephiroth's not even supposed to be in that office at that point.
Yeah.
Hence why the Whispers make sure Barrett doesn't die.
Yeah.
So to kind of go from this point forward, the Whispers then surround Shinra Tower. And the reason why is because Rufus wants to personally go after Cloud. That's why he's going around the office, and he's just freaked the fuck out because he can see them. The Whispers make themselves known to people that they're trying to get the attention of or stop from doing something.
Yeah.
They will make themselves visible because Sung cannot see them. He's like, what are you looking at?
Yeah.
So then after you finish the highway fight, Sephiroth shows up, and that's when they leave Shinra Tower. They surround all of Midgar. They're like, you can't leave. He's not supposed to be here.
Yeah.
That's when Sephiroth turns around and cuts a hole into the fucking singularity.
Yeah.
I mean, that's big evidence right there to me that this is Sephiroth that has already been through everything in 7. He's super powerful because Sephiroth is super powerful before that.
Yeah.
But not a dimension cutter.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of getting into like crazy power scaling stuff that I watch discussion videos on, so it seems kind of second nature to me. So I'm not trying to lose anyone or anything or talk too fast.
Right.
But my point is that even though Sephiroth is strong enough to possess an alien life form and make it shapeshift into him, throughout the original game, that shapeshifted Jenova will not physically confront the party. It'll drop a piece of itself and let that fight as a Jenova boss fight. Because every time one shows up, Sephiroth like flies away and a piece of Jenova shows up.
Yeah.
So if it is Jenova that you fight at the end of Remake, why the fuck can it cut into dimensions and take people to the edge of the universe,
Yeah.
but still be under Sephiroth's control.
Yeah.
It just makes no sense from a power scaling perspective that it's Jenova. Jenova is really freaking strong, don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's all the evidence I have that it points towards. No, this is a different Sephiroth.
Yeah.
You know? And like I said, people get confused at that scene because they're like, well, no, the Whispers just, they try to inhibit the party. But the big thing that points towards, I mean, other than that they blatantly say, no, the Whispers are here to make sure that no deviations happen.
Yeah.
When you're in chapter, is it 16 or no? It's 16. Hojo is about to spill the beans. He's like, Cloud, you weren't a soldier.
Yeah.
And he gets cut off by the Whispers. They tackle him. They're like,
Yeah.
shit, he's not supposed to know that yet.
Right.
That's the big piece of evidence that, like, no, they're doing as Red 13 said they're supposed to do. And, they swarm Midgar. They wall it off to try and make sure that the party does not interact with Sephiroth because they are not supposed to meet him yet.
Yeah.
And one other little thing I'll mention. I'm sorry I've ranted so long, but
that's what this platform is for.
The Sephiroth in the original game, when you meet him on the Junin boat, which is the Jenova Sephiroth. Again, sorry it's so complicated. It's Sephiroth acting through somebody. Jenova is the proxy. He does not know who Cloud is. Even though he develops this extreme vendetta against him, especially after being stopped twice by him, he initially does not care. He's like, who are you? He's got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
So why would that same Sephiroth torment Cloud from the beginning?
Yeah.
It just does not add up. That it's just the remake with a little bit of embellishment to make it more modern or make it more engaging. Well, it is more engaging because of what they're doing. This is all the stuff before even getting into the ending, which I'm about to ask you about. But it's just like all the evidence, even before the ending, points towards this is a different Sephiroth or the original Sephiroth. It's something else. And that has ramifications for the entire story. Yeah. So the actual ending, like after you've beaten Sephiroth, what did you think of it?
It was definitely a trip because I wasn't really sure exactly what was going to transpire. The scenes with Zack really threw me for a bit, but then
especially if you've played Crisis Core, because they're basically frame for frame remakes.
Yeah. And the one thing that really more solidified the alternate timeline, especially in that instance, because that feels like it was its own separate timeline, because there's a piece of trash that flies by after he's fought all of the Shinra people, and the mascot Stamp is a different breed of dog than it was throughout the game when you saw it graffitied on the wall. It was some sort of almost, I don't know what breed of dog. It was a longer haired dog. It was not the wiener.
It kind of looks like a husky in the Zack scene. Yeah. And before that, it's more like a beagle.
Yeah. And so we see this, and it kind of is like, okay, well, why is Stamp different? That doesn't make any sense. Why would a company mascot change within just a matter of a very, very small amount of time? When Zack and Cloud go to Midgar originally, I mean, Cloud, as you explained to me before, Cloud jumps right into going and doing his mercenary stuff.
It could be as short as a few weeks between Zack's death and the bombing mission.
Yeah, so it doesn't make any real conceivable sense why that particular image would change like that in just a matter of a few weeks time. A company wouldn't do that, just suddenly change their whole mascot, especially because there are also people throughout the game that you meet who are fans of Shinra, and they're
Mm-hmm.
wearing apparel that has stamped the dog on it, and it's the same dog that you've seen graffitied throughout. It's not a different breed. So that really threw me and was like, oh my gosh, this is a timeline where Zack potentially is still alive, and whether Cloud dies in his place is to be unseen. I'm sure that we're going to get more of this in the next portion of the game whenever that does decide to come out. But it was definitely something I kind of it was very emotional for me. Again, seeing Biggs alive, that was just like that hit the heartstrings. Barrett calling out to Marlene and saying that he'd be home soon, that was another, like, because that I think, a lot of people were, I've heard musings that Barrett is not a good character in this remake, and that there are a bunch of different aspects about him that people don't like, but I didn't see that. I was like, and it's very more apparent how much Marlene means to him. I mean, to the point where
Mm-hmm.
he's making sure she signs off on him going somewhere. I mean, you like when he got stabbed by Sephiroth, that freaking threw me. I was like, holy shit, are they really going that way? Like, is fucking Barrett gonna die? Like, that would just be like, oh my god. Like, and of course that doesn't happen, but still, I was like, for a minute, I was like, oh my god, they killed Barrett. It's
Right.
but I would say that it was definitely interesting that's where they ended it, and it left me wanting more, because, and especially Aerith's final line about how when it starts raining, and she says, I forget the exact wording, but she says that she prefers the metal sky,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah,
She's scared to leave.
yeah, yeah, and so it definitely left me wanting more.
Now, in a good or a bad way, like I was talking with one friend, and he was like, he's been playing. He played Kingdom Hearts growing up, and he's extremely frustrated that even in a game like this, Nomura had to quote unquote end it with a cliffhanger.
Mhm.
Now, I do feel it is a cliffhanger, but not in a way that leaves me unsatisfied. Do you feel unsatisfied by it, where you're like, well, damn it, now I just wait for the next game?
it it didn't leave me well, and I want to say it didn't leave me feeling that way, because kind of going off of what you said, that this is a big deal, like Final Fantasy VII Remake is a big deal, and Square would be uh remiss to fuck it up. So I feel that while it may not be fast, we're definitely going to see the next portions of this game released in a more timely manner than the Kingdom Hearts series. I mean, there's a very huge time gap between Kingdom Hearts 2 and Kingdom Hearts 3. Now, granted, there are little, side games and extra, world developing games that expand upon the universe and the story sprinkled throughout, but there was a very long discrepancy between the sequel and then its successor. So it definitely feels like it's one of those things where I'm anticipating the next game. Like, it's not something that, like, if I had the choice, like if it was DLC, like if they had said, like, after like the second week that the next month they're going to release the next portion via DLC, like, of course I'd buy it and I'd jump right into it. But it's not one of those things where, like, I'm so deprived of the way that it ended that I don't want to wait for the next portion. Like, I feel like I was very satisfied and content with where it left off, because, and I kind of assumed that that's where they were going to leave it. I felt if they had done any more, it would be kind of weird, because then they wouldn't have a good spot to stop it. Like, if you played like if they had like 3 more hours where you played the first little bit of outside Midgar, like, and you got up to like that first cave or something that you have to go through, like in the original, like,
Mm-hmm.
then I would be like, okay, that's a really weird stopping point. Like, that to me would be like, okay, that's stupid. They shouldn't have ended it there. But the way that it ended, it's like, okay, so like this is the arc of the story they wanted to focus on, and this arc has met its conclusion at this point. And so, then they could continue from that point on. So that's how I felt about it. I felt it was an appropriate place to leave it. If other people don't feel that way, that's totally within their right. I totally get it. But I felt like if they had added any more or any less, it would be really weird to end the game. Like if they had ended the game, like if they left Shinra Tower and drove away on the bikes and that's where they ended it, again, it would be like one of those weird things. Like, why did they end it there? But I feel that it was good for what it was.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I feel like while it is a cliffhanger ending in the fact that they've clearly set a new base level, they're like, okay, the end of the game is about destroying these arbiters of fate so that they can't interfere now. So things can be different. So they want to leave you with like, okay, next part's probably going to have more changes. We put a big change at the end of this one, implying that Zack is alive.
Yeah.
So they're like, we're going to leave you with that. You could sit on that and you'll get to see how it goes. It didn't feel like a bad cliffhanger, like an example of like where the status quo of the game is reset to how it was at the beginning. Or I'm just talking about like as a general story. If you had a character with this motivation to say find someone, and they go through a whole journey and they find that person and then immediately lose them again. Like you're at the same point, so it feels unsatisfying. So it didn't have that feeling to it. It is like I said, it is a cliffhanger in the sense that like, well, you have me hooked for the next game, but in a satisfying way.
Yeah.
I agree with you though. It was such a trip how that was unfolding. I haven't seen a video game ending that was so mind-boggling and so long. I can't even think of something to compare it to where you're just like overloaded with like, oh, that's what's happening, and oh god, that means this. Oh god,
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially with something as simple as the chip bag that has the different stamp on it. You're like, oh shit, what the fuck happened?
Yeah.
Because not to ramble too much more about all of my evidence, but regardless of where it happens, Zack's scenes take place before what's going on. There's no way you can write around that.
Yeah.
So, they go into the area to fight the Whispers, and it's literally labeled the Singularity. So, I'm not knowledgeable enough to talk about like the science fiction implications of a singularity, but it means crazy shit can happen. So what it seems to imply is that destroying the Whispers in the singularity retroactively undoes events that they're supposed to keep in place.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it's due to the proximity because Zack is near Midgar in the past where he's supposed to die. Maybe due to that proximity, that's why it can retroactively undo what he had happened to him. Yeah. Because if we take out the rule of that you have to be in proximity of these beings, then it's like, well, shit, is the whole game retroactively undone? Yeah. I hope it's explained well. That's all I can say.
Definitely.
Because despite all the evidence that I think points to it, the only thing that we can say is that the stamp chip bag is the absolute proof that they've at least changed something, maybe a butterfly effect type thing.
Yeah.
That and
very well be
they may end up this is kind of going into our last point about like what do we think is going to happen in the future installments, but they may, like you said, they might end up killing Cloud in his place. That way we don't have two Clouds running around. That Cloud could never wake up from Mako poisoning. That Cloud could work for Sephiroth. He could just be completely manipulated. Or that Cloud could lend a lot of credence. There's a point later in the game that really breaks Cloud's mind where Sephiroth says, no, you're a clone.
Mhm.
And if there's another cloud around, that's going to be really hard to disprove.
Yeah.
So it's like, regardless of what they do, we were kind of saying this earlier on, they have tweaked things enough and they took long enough time to set it up to where everybody who has played this game before is now hooked
Mhm.
to see what could possibly happen, and they could do nothing. They could literally make the rest of these parts note for note the same game, but everyone would be going, well, they set this shit up, so I have to see what happens.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and it would be really weird if they didn't go forward with more of that. I mean, I guess anything could happen, if the fan reaction is like an overall negative, which I don't think it really has been as far as I can
It's been the
tell.
most interesting discourse I've
Yeah.
had about a game in a long time, because all of my friends that I've talked to about it besides you are very against it. They don't know what to think.
Yeah.
I haven't read a lot of online discourse about it because, like I said, I was trying to keep my own opinions on
Oh yeah,
things.
absolutely.
But yeah, it's just very interesting because it is mixed, certainly, but to me, it seems more so mixed because a lot of people are confused.
Yeah.
And as I prefaced, I can't say with absolute certainty that everything I'm saying is correct, but that's what the game seems to be saying to me. And like you were saying about playing other games that deal with weird time shit, I
Mhm.
think I felt primered for this from having to keep up with Kingdom Hearts the past 10 years.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I'm down for whatever time travel multiverse shit you're trying to do, Nomura.
Yeah. All right. So any final things to touch on with the story? I'm not thinking of anything at the moment that I felt worth mentioning, other than yeah, the spooky, scary skeletons ghost hunting experience in the train graveyard was kind of
The
dumb.
trade, I'm okay with it now. I kind of hated it at the time, but I'm looking forward to retrying it.
Yeah. Yeah, there was I think if my only critique is that there were certain aspects, and I think you can agree, is that they did feel just a little bit like filler. Like they just had to find something to pad out the runtime of like the 40 hours, like, which is so weird because, correct me if I'm wrong, but did they say that? I could have sworn I heard that it was like there was going to be like at least 100 hours worth of gameplay. Like,
Well, yeah, not including the story, because if you go and do all the side quests and you do
mhm,
all of the VR missions, and I guess if you do the hard mode shit, because
yeah.
I'm currently sitting at 60 hours and I've done a
Mhm.
little bit more side stuff than you.
Yeah, I mean, I've stopped pretty much as soon as I beat the
Yeah,
game.
yeah,
So
I've gone and I've mastered some materia and I've done all of the Corneo Coliseum. Um, what else did I do? And I'm
I think you were
currently
starting the VR stuff, weren't you?
I'm currently working on the hard mode VR stuff, which you can only get after you beat the game.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, they say there's 100 hours of content there. Who knows how far they were stretching that? I could see there being 100 hours if you try to platinum the game, because that's
Yeah.
going to require replaying Chapter 9 at least 3 times,
Ugh.
because you got to get all 3 different dresses
Yep.
for Cloud. So you got to pick the different hand massages.
Well, technically,
You
you
got to go
have
all
to
the way
go
back to Chapter 2 and pick a different choice for
chapter
Tifa.
3. I think it's chapter 3 when that takes place.
Yeah,
So,
and you also have to go back to Chapter 5 and do less side quests. That's how you
oh,
get
is
the
it?
different.
I,
That's how you get the different Aerith dresses.
I thought it was the side quests in that chapter when
Uh, in Chapter 8, I'm sorry, you have to go back to Sector
yeah.
5, and if you do 0 of them, she gets a really ugly dress. If you do anywhere between, well, I saw a dude who said he did 5 and he got the other dress. I'm thinking maybe it's anywhere between 1 and 6, or
Mhm.
1 and 5. I'm sorry, to get the middle dress, and then if you do 6, you get the super dress.
Yeah.
And then Tifa's is just your dialogue choice.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe they meant like, oh, if you 100% it, it'll be
Yeah.
100 hours of content. But I definitely want to try and max out the weapons. I'm excited to see if I get a 6th weapon level. If I don't, I'll probably just finish the VR missions and then maybe mess around with hard mode.
Yeah,
Uh, in the meantime, until the next game comes out.
yeah. There is one thing I am really curious about is like what are they going to do in regards to that? Are they going to offer some sort of data flag system where your stuff transfers over when you get to the next part, like your character level, your weapons, your materia, like is all that going to carry over to the next game, or are you going to have to like
Yeah, that's a very
repeat?
curious question.
You know, because I don't think people would be too happy if they have to start from level 1 again in the next
Well,
portion. So
there's two ways to think about it. You're either gonna have to start from level 1, and that just affects your health and magic. Well, it affects your stats, right?
mm,
You're either gonna have to start from level 1, or for the sake of balance of the game, they'll scale the enemies to level 50 right out of the gate.
yeah,
So either way, it's like you're level 1. You
yeah,
know what I'm saying?
yeah,
I just hope that they allow you to carry the equipment over, the weapon levels, your materia levels,
yeah.
because fuck having to remaster any of these materia. That would be bullshit.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and yeah, just all they have to do is add more weapons, which gives you more abilities.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to be a difficult thing to be creative about, honestly, because I think every character already has 6 abilities, because I think they all have 6 weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Because Cloud has Buster, Iron, Nailbat, Hard Edge,
Mithril Saber.
Then the split twin sword, whatever that is.
Oh yeah, twin stinger or whatever.
Yeah, twin stinger. Yeah, and so I think everyone has 6 weapons and 6 abilities. So it's like I'm worried of how difficult it may be to put 6 more abilities in that feel worth using, because
Yeah,
the 6 abilities that you get per character are all pretty neat, honestly.
yeah, yeah. I would
You know,
definitely
you'll have one that increases stagger, one that does damage to a single enemy, one that does damage to multiple enemies. Some characters get magic attacks, you know, like non-elemental magic.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I just hope they can make it worthwhile and not feel repetitive, or don't go the opposite horrible route where you just don't get new abilities.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would definitely hope that they do something because, like, obviously, there's a couple of weapons that are going to be super important for a lot of people, like the Ultima weapon for Cloud. So I would hope that it would have its own unique ability, and it's not just like, oh, if you got this ability earlier on another weapon, you're already good because you already got the ability. You know, it'd be really weird if they did that route. So we'll just have to see. I would hope that they say something about it before the next game releases, just to kind of quell any questions that people might have in regards to that. Like they have to do some sort of data flag system. Like I just don't think it would, especially because these are supposed to be continuity games. It's not like they're their own individual experience.
Yeah, it's definitely just got to be the exact same as dot hack.
Yeah.
It can't work any other way without making the player base feel cheated, because they're like, I invested the time in this character and you're resetting it.
Yeah.
You know, and they given even though they have an excuse now to do a lot of changes, they can't pull some bullshit like Kingdom Hearts. Well, Cloud went to sleep for a year, so he's emaciated.
Yeah. There's only certain games where that works, and even then, it's like,
Yeah,
you know, why can't Mega Man use any of the former Robot Master abilities? Why does Samus?
that's why you buy Wily Wars, sir. That's why you buy Wily Wars. The guy did. Then you can use I think you can use a loadout of 6 in the extra, because they give you an extra Wily's Castle after you beat the 3 games. You can use a loadout from all 3 games.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't think I have anything else left to add in the story segments. Did you have anything else you wanted to touch on?
No, I've rambled enough. So
Okay. All right, so we are going to move on to the ending discussion portion of this video, of this podcast, if you will. So our first one was what does this game as a whole mean for the future parts? We kind of touched on that, but if you
Yeah,
want
we've
to
kind
take
of
the
already
floor,
gotten into it.
if you want to take the floor and add anything else to it, what?
The only thing I can say that I'm I don't know if I would say concerned, but they did a really good job of making all four characters very unique in this game.
Yeah.
Everyone has a really designated thing to them, and the only characters that feel kind of similar at some points is Aerith and Barrett, because they both have long range, but Aerith does a lot less damage and
Uh-huh.
she's a lot slower. So in going off of that, I hope they have some really crazy sub mechanics for Vincent, because I'm worried that he'll feel too similar to Barrett because they're both going to be shooting.
Yeah.
So I hope that Vincent has like some fucking crazy form of I don't know if this is really going into what our little topic here is, but I guess I'm just saying that I don't want the characters to be too similar. I hope that Vincent, he's long range, but maybe has some up close abilities. Barrett kind of has that too. He has the uppercut and stuff, but I hope that he skews more in one direction so that he doesn't just feel like a different Barrett.
Yeah.
Because I don't see that being a problem with Red, Keiichi, Sid, or
Yuffie. Yeah.
They're all going to feel crazy different. So I'm really excited about how they'll force Vincent and Yuffie to be required. I'm interested to see how those events work.
Yeah, because those are the only two. They're both optional, correct? Like,
yeah. Yuffie is a random encounter. The percentage of it goes up the farther in the game you are. And Vincent, you have to figure out a puzzle in the Shinra mansion, fight a boss, and then you get him.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's I wish I could say, oh well, this happened, so this is gonna happen, but we can't say.
Yeah, that's true.
I think you really covered it mostly with the data flag system. Like they got to make it. They got to hold the continuity between the games, between the parts.
Yeah.
I guess might be a weird question for you since you've played it less, but two things.
Sure.
Where do you want the next part to get to? Like, how far along do you want it to go? Or rather, what is reasonable, you think, with the scope that they've set up? How far can they reasonably go in the next part? And what are you looking forward to most now that we know how the game is going to be? What part are you most excited to see remade?
I'll answer the latter first.
Okay.
The weapon fights. I am
so they're gonna be fucking huge.
I can't fucking wait because again, we talk so much amongst ourselves. At least I haven't really like vocally talked about it. I don't think. Shadow of the Colossus when they remade that, and just I absolutely love the Colossus fights in that game, and so just imagining the scale that Ruby weapon and the underwater fight, how that's going to transpire with Emerald weapon, and then it just like I really want to see where that can go, especially too because there is a portion of the game like I really would love to see how like the high wind is going to work, and like I want to see like what they do in terms of like traveling across the overworld, or if it's all going to be connected like in a Dark Soul sense where the whole world's connected and you can only because they did offer a fast traveling system through the chocobos in Midgar, so I'm wondering if like they're going to keep that system, or if they are going to have some sort of like overworld sort of feel like the original, especially when you get to the point where you get Highwind and Sid. So
I feel like they certainly will, simply because 15 did it. Now 15 is probably going to be a lot less dense than whatever our overworld's going to end up being. They're going to have to be really careful about when they introduce the Highwind, because you'll be able to get to spots that maybe aren't in that part of the game yet.
Yeah.
So they're gonna have to think up some interesting barriers to keep you from going.
Uh,
Go ahead.
yeah. So there's that. I am very curious about the chocobo racing. I want to see how they're going to end up doing that if they're going to still implement it. I mean, a lot of the mini games, the pull up and sit up mini games were in the original, correct?
The pull-up game wasn't. It was just squats,
It was just
and
the squats. Okay.
yeah, and it was not nearly as difficult.
Right.
Um,
um,
yeah, like mini. The only thing you could say that was in this one that was in the original was squats and the Coliseum. The Coliseum and Gold Saucer has some random elements to it though that this one doesn't.
okay. So that would also be another thing too, because I know in the chocobo racing in the original, you had the ability to have Tifa or Vincent race on the chocobo. So I wonder if they're going to change that and allow Barrett and the other characters to actually race chocobos too. It'll be really cool to see what they do. Like I don't know because did you have like did you actually control the chocobo racing? Like I'm trying to remember if you actually controlled it like Mario Kart a bit, like you actually.
No, so quick clarification: you can race as Tifa or Sid, not Vincent. But the only way that you can is there's a portion of the game where Cloud is not in the party,
Mhm.
and either Tifa or Sid is the leader. So those are the only points where those characters can race a chocobo. So I do hope, like you said though, that you could pick like your jockey, or
Mhm.
like what character you want to race on the chocobo.
Yeah.
But um, it does not control anything like Mario Kart, and I bet you 99% of the people who play Final Fantasy VII play that race using the infinite endurance glitch and just mash through it.
Yeah.
There's like no skill involved. So I would much prefer like if they called somebody in who's like designed a kart racing game or something
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah.
That mini game has a lot of potential.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we've seen the chocobos in game, so I'm definitely
Mm-hmm.
really curious because that also kind of extends to the whole overworld thing of like, are you going to have to do the whole chocobo raising and raise a gold chocobo to cross over the ocean and the mountains to get certain materia? Like, there's a lot of stuff that I'm just like, holy crap! Like, I really want to see how they're going to pull this off because it's going to be so radically different on how they have to do it. So that kind
Right,
of
the scale is going to be insane.
yeah, yeah. So that kind of with me, um, because like I don't really know how many. I would say probably our best guess is that there's going to be either 3 to 4 parts. I would say. I would
Mm-hmm.
hope it's 3. I don't want them to pad it out to a fourth, unless like the fourth is just like an add-on where it's like, okay, it's the final bit where you go and face Sephiroth and deal with Meteor and all that. But that's the big part where it's like it's full open world. Anything you haven't done, you can go do. It's not like where it's tied down in a chapter selection. It's like no, the world is your oyster, and you go and just do whatever the hell you want before you go face Sephiroth. So, but I would
And that's
prefer
very
if
much how the third disc works of the original
yeah,
game.
yeah, much like Legend of Dragoon. Legend of Dragoon is the same way. So I would prefer that if they do go that route, that like the fourth episode, if you will, is kind of like that. If anything, if they do go that far, if they were to narrow it to 3, I would probably it's tough because like I would assume that the second part would have to go up to the first weapon fight with Ultimate Weapon. I would think. I don't
That'd be an
know.
odd spot to put it because that's like literally in the first third of disc 2.
Oh
It would be a
really?
weird spot to
Oh
put.
really? I didn't realize there was a bunch
Yeah,
more
no, it's
after.
it's okay. You might be thinking of Diamond Weapon instead, the silver one,
Oh okay. Yeah.
because that's closer to the end of disc 2.
Okay. Well, damn. Then you get the Ultimate Weapon really early. I feel.
Actually, you can't because you fight Ultima in a scripted part at the beginning of disc 2,
Mhm.
and then it isn't until you've beaten Diamond Weapon that he appears on the map. And then you have to chase him.
Oh okay. Okay. I didn't realize he was like Ruby and Emerald in that aspect. Um,
Yeah, but he you actually have to chase him in the high wind. After you
Oh, okay.
chase him and fight him like 3 or 4 times, he'll go to Cosmo Canyon and then you have to kill him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
So
ends up being a scripted event at that point because not only do you get the Ultima weapon, um you gain access if you don't have a gold chocobo, this is how you get access to a side dungeon.
okay. Okay. So yeah, I would say up to diamond weapon would be preferable for the second part if they were to narrow it to three, because then the third part can be about Sephiroth and the overarching thing with Meteor and everything
Mhm.
like that. If they were to do four, I really don't know what I would expect. Like I feel like if they did four, a certain portion of that, like either two or three, will be just mainly filler. It'll just be like expanded universe kind of stuff where it's like, oh, you know,
Mhm.
there's a little bit more to like these specific areas. Um, so it's really hard to say. I am excited for several things like the chocobo racing, fighting the weapons. I really want to see what they do with the gold saucer because that's one of my favorite places in Final Fantasy 14. It's just so huge and just feels alive. So like
Yeah,
it's going to feel even
of
more
any
so.
part in the game, the gold saucer is ripe to just be massively expanded, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, and I am really curious because like I want to get to a part in the sequel where you get additional party members. Like I definitely want to play as Red because man, like it was hard not to want to play as him throughout the chapters
Yeah, it
that
was
he's
so
with
cool how
you.
you could see him like doing his limit breaks and shit.
Yeah, exactly.
That was
So it's
awesome.
like, oh my god, I want to
And
play as him.
yeah, I'm very excited to play as him too because my initial playthrough, my team was I think it was Cloud, Red, and Barrett until I got Sid,
Mhm.
and then it was Sid, Red, and Cloud.
Yeah, I think Sid's going to be a lot of fun too because dragoons are really fun in
I
Final
hope
Fantasy
that I
14.
hope they
So
let him go in. I really hope that they don't tone his language down too much.
they didn't really tone like they kind of toned Barrett's down, but I don't
He
know.
doesn't have
Like,
any fucks, but
yeah, and I was actually surprised with how much Cloud cussed because that wasn't like
even Aerith
uh,
cusses.
yeah, like I was really kind of taken aback by that, but this is just the theme now because that's like so prominent in like the Castlevania Netflix series, for example, with freaking Trevor and every other character saying "fuck," you know. So it's like,
Yeah, I mean, to backtrack real quick about the voice acting, this is something
Mhm.
I've been mentioning. I really love that the dialogue was so freaking good, but doesn't come off as that haha I quipped type of dialogue. Do you know what I mean?
If you could elaborate
Like it
just a
doesn't
little
come
bit.
off the same way as the Castlevania dialogue does.
Oh, okay. I
There's
see.
just there's a certain delivery and writing style about a lot of those Netflix shows,
Mm.
or like a Marvel movie where it's very fast and oh ho ho, uh,
Yeah.
I burn type of thing.
Yeah. I understand.
Yeah. Um, to answer my own questions, I think that the next part, if I could be generous,
Hmm.
I think that the next part should end at Aerith's death.
Okay.
I think that really would help to get across the theme of life that the game is about.
Hmm.
So I think that would be really good to end a game there
Yeah, I could see
and
that.
make everyone go through the quote unquote grief while waiting for the third game to come out.
Yeah.
Because then what you have is a chunk in Midgar, then you have the chunk that goes across the world, and then from Aerith's death, you have Cloud's breakdown, recovery, and then the final fight.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that's being extremely generous. I think if we're lucky, trying to think what happens before Aerith's death. It might end. If we're lucky, it might end at the Temple of the Ancients
Hmm.
because you could put some big boss fights there
Yeah.
and have the cliffhanger of like, oh shit, where's Aerith? You know, um, we'll see. That's how I would like to break it up. I agree with you that I think it should be 3 parts.
Yeah.
I hope it's really not more than 3.
Yeah.
And as for the thing I'm looking forward to most, it's actually the entire Nibelheim flashback, like the false one that Cloud tells, where he's like, "Oh, I did this and I fought Sephiroth and all that."
Mhm.
I'm very excited to see how creepy they can make that scene. I I really like the new actor for Sephiroth, so I think him portraying Sephiroth's descent into madness will just be awesome.
Yeah.
The Calm flashback is one of my favorite parts in the game, um, in its entirety. So I think leading up to it, I was actually hoping that that would be the way that they would shoehorn in the Sephiroth boss fight, is that it would end with the flashback, and that's like the final dungeon, and then you fight
Mhm.
Sephiroth at the end. But I like what they ended up doing instead.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say Vincent and the Calm flashback is what I'm looking forward to most.
Okay. Um, I do have one more thing to, not this point, but I want to get on to the next point, but I do have an additional point that I want us to touch on. So our next point is how has it changed our previous perceptions of what the what we thought Final Fantasy VII Remake was going to be. I assume that's what this means.
Yeah, we've kind of glossed over it, but I was expecting a remake that was 1-to-1 at certain points with
Mhm,
fan service embellishments,
mhm.
and that was my perception of the game up until the very end. And so now that it's changed, it's just like I'm 100% on board. I really like that they took the whole game to set it up, and I'll be happy to replay it at least once or twice more before the next part comes out, because it just, now that I have the whole idea in mind,
Mhm.
I enjoy the whole game. Like I said, I consider it an extension of the original game. Doesn't replace the original game at all, and I feel it doesn't hurt it either because of what they've set up.
Yeah. I think for me, my original perceptions is we kind of touched upon this earlier, but mentioning that Square would be very in a lot of hot water if they fucked up Final Fantasy VII, because it's such an important piece of
It's the baby.
it's the baby. It is such an important piece of JRPG history. It did very much change the landscape in many ways. Um, some people may disagree with that, but I think that was kind of the kickoff point, especially here in the West. That was a big kickoff and turning point for that sort of genre. So I originally thought, and there are certain things, and some people, at least to me, with certain movies, there are certain movies that just cannot be remade. They stand the
Mhm.
test of time, and if you were to remake it, you would have to do it one for one. You couldn't deviate, you couldn't add, you couldn't change any of what made the original so great. Disney is falling heavily victim to this with all their freaking live action remakes of their animated movies. But a prime example I feel is like The Wizard of Oz. Like that movie, because of when it was
Yeah.
made, it's just such an important piece of theatrical releases, and it's such an important film that it would be really really hard to capture the same sort of magic that film had when it was made if they were try to remake it in the modern era, because it would just be, it would be totally different from what it was. And like what a lot of movies are facing is, that the oversaturation of CGI and just, replacing physical actors with 3D actors, or doing this weird mocap sort of stuff. It just loses a lot of the charm that some of these original films have. So I kind of view Final Fantasy VII in a similar light. So my original perception is that if they were going to remake it, they had to do it one for one. It had to be turn based. It had to follow a very similar story. with maybe slight deviations and changes, maybe to the dialogue, just to kind of maybe flesh out characters a bit more, So I really thought it needed to be that way. However, with the remake that we got, it has convinced me otherwise. I think what they've done for the remake was the appropriate action. Like, I don't think it would have had the same weight that it did if it were still turn based. And this is what a lot of, bringing up another subsection that another community I'm not even remotely invested in. RE, the Resident Evil fandom is in a very similar situation where it's like a lot of people were very against the remakes having gone to over the shoulder as opposed to fixed camera angles. But when you sit and play those games, you realize why they did that. Because there are certain staples of older games that have not been repeated, and there's a reason for that. While we might get games like Shovel Knight that appeal to the 16-bit era and play like a 16-bit side-scroller platformer, it's not nearly as, it doesn't have like this high insane difficulty where people are like, oh my god, this game is the Dark Souls of side-scrollers or whatever, whatever.
Yeah, it's no NES Batman.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a reason that while a lot of those old games still stand the test of time to a lot of people, there's a reason why when they do modern takes on a similar format, they have to change certain aspects of it, because it's just not going to appeal to a modern audience the same way that it did way back then. So Final Fantasy VII definitely showed me that it's entirely possible to do this and still please original fans and new fans alike. While I do agree with you, like what you said earlier, it would be very, very difficult to get the same reaction or the same, understanding of Final Fantasy VII Remake if you haven't played the original. I still feel it would be something that a modern gamer of today's era could play and still be like, this is a fun overall experience and it's an enjoyable experience. It doesn't feel like a slog, because that's a problem with a lot of the older styles of gameplay, fixed camera angles, tank controls, turn-based combat, those things pan out a game in sometimes in superficial ways. Pokemon is about the only one that's gotten away with it for as long as it has. Pokemon has not changed its format
Yeah, well, it plays back into your earlier point that the generation after us or people our age that haven't been gaming their whole lives, like, they don't have the patience for it.
Yeah.
There's so much that me and you or our brothers will put up with because that's how it was.
Yeah.
Some like I wouldn't ask somebody who got into our imaginary person got into video games this year, right? I am not going to ask them to play Final Fantasy VII, the original.
No. Well, it would be the same with me. It's like if somebody were to ask me if they wanted to get into Castlevania, I would tell them play Symphony. Like start from Symphony and go onward. Like it would be very, very hard for me in full confidence to be like, no, you should play Castlevania 1. You should play Castlevania 1 and start from Castlevania 1. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There are certain series where I think you could get away with that, like Mega Man. I think Mega Man, you could pretty much play the first one, or you could play Mega Man 7 or 8 and still get the same sort of...
Why would you want to do that?
Hey, as long as you're not playing Mega Man Soccer, it's all good. But I feel that there are certain series where it's like, it's okay to go back to the first entry because you'll still get the same appeal. And
you'll get the same core experience.
Exactly. But when it comes to certain series like Final Fantasy, it would be very hard for me to be like even though Final Fantasy has established itself as a series where each entry is its own experience, it would be hard unless you already had some sort of wanting to play games in a similar style to a turn-based combat, to be like, yeah, you should go play all the old ones. Like I would probably recommend more modern ones that feel more modern, like maybe Final Fantasy 12. Because 12 was the first one that sort of started the whole real-time combat, excluding 10-2, because people don't want to talk about that game for some reason, you know. But that would be a good starting point for a more modern Final Fantasy experience. Would be Final Fantasy 12. So it is definitely something, you know. It would be very very hard to recommend older entries, especially if a modern gamer is not already familiar with that type of genre.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I can see this, even with as confusing as its ending is, in a roundabout way, it could make them go, well, I have to play the original to understand it, I guess, or they just decide to wait.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if they do it right, with as crazy of a setup as the ending of this game is, if it is done right, you could probably play the entirety of the remake, however many parts it is, and understand what happened.
Mm.
Hoping so, anyway. That's
Yeah.
part of the problem with talking about anything to do with the ending, because it's really not over.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So did you have anything else to add to this just this portion of the discussion?
what block are we on again?
We are on how it changed our previous perceptions.
No, the ending just made me go, okay, this is the. So,
You cut out just a minute. Could you repeat what you said?
really, all the ending did was make me go, okay, this is the game. I like it now. So,
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. So I had one more thing I wanted to add before we finally close out this discussion, which is already almost toting 3 hours. I think that's how long I talked to Avalanche Jared, actually. So
that's short for an episode about Final Fantasy VII. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, that's fair. So I wanted to ask, with your impressions of Final Fantasy VII Remake, would you want to see any of the expanded story, any of the expanded material? Would you like to see something like Advent Children translated to a game? Would you like to see a remake of Crisis Core or Before Crisis? Would you like to see any of that done in the Final Fantasy VII Remake style?
That's a gargantuan task, I feel, because when you talk about, do it in the remake style, I feel like that immediately implies the same level of scope.
Yeah.
But if we're just talking like, put it in this aesthetic with this gameplay, it's possible. Small backstory, like when I first played Final Fantasy VII, it was like a month before Advent Children was announced, like the initial trailer where Cloud's still using the Buster Sword.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really have feelings of this series without the expanded universe in mind.
Right.
So I'm pretty much down for whatever they do. I don't hate any of it. I vehemently defend it most of the times.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have issues with the expanded story because I don't have the perspective of sitting on the original for 8 years before Advent Children came out.
Yeah.
So personally, yes, I hope that as an extra little bit, I would love for there to be an Advent Children chapter or set of chapters. I just want to drive around whatever world map they come up with on Cloud's giant bike with fucking 6 swords. And I want to fuck shit up. That's all the game has to be. It doesn't even have to have Advent Children's story in it. But it really depends on what they do. But Crisis Core is a harder thing to tackle because of legal issues with Gact.
Yeah.
Who is the musician who he lent his likeness to a major character in Crisis Core named Genesis, who apparently exists in this remake still. Side tangent, but Hojo mentions G-types existing, which were the soldiers infused with Genesis's, that's a mouthful, cells.
Yeah.
And there are S-types as well. That's what Cloud is. He has Sephiroth cells inside of him. So, Crisis Core would be a gargantuan task, in my opinion, though I feel it is ripe to be adjusted. It has, out of all of the games, it has the most issues, I feel, and not just because of the legal issues with Gact. Um, Before Crisis would be amazing because it's all about the Turks.
Yeah.
And the Turks are pretty much everybody's favorite like subgroup of characters, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all possible, but with the remake itself being such a huge task, like I wouldn't hold my breath on it happening.
Yeah.
But like I just stick by my original point. Like I want an Advent Children chapter just because I think the designs of Cloud in that are really amazing. I really like how they changed his weaponry. And I even do still really like the story of Advent Children. So it would be neat to have it expanded upon a little bit, not too much, but enough to make a little more sense.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't expect it.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, as like a full game, I probably wouldn't expect that. But we did get some DLC added, so I do feel that there is potential to expand or add things through that notion. Now, granted, I'm not hoping they do that, like, because I have this weird fear that they might start like, oh, here's a little piece of the next game, you can buy it now and play it now, but you won't get the full experience until the next portions of it are out. And that's probably not the smartest thing. Like a lot of people have already criticized Square for that, so I hope they don't do that. But I still would like to see, even if they don't go the full route of like, oh, we're gonna do like a epilogue DLC that covers Advent Children content. Um, I wouldn't be against like maybe costume DLC, or some sort of like weapon skin DLC that maybe turns the Buster Sword into what the sword that Cloud has in Advent Children looks like. So I don't know. Like I would be fine with that, like cosmetic stuff. I think it would be a nice little neat thing. And if they wait to do something like that until like the last game has come out, be like, oh, here you can now like use this DLC across all parts if you want to dress up Cloud like his Advent Children self. It'd be kind of weird.
That would be
but
awesome. And just a quick interjection. It's less about the look of the Advent Children's sword. It's just that I think it could be amazing mechanically.
yeah, I think it could bring a whole new level to Cloud's gameplay. Like
it would be really interesting if that was an alternate ultimate weapon for him, for example. Like, okay, if you've beaten the game, you can fuck around with this thing.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. But yeah, I'm kind of the same mindset. Like, we'll have to kind of see where it goes. Obviously, like, if this does successfully enough, which it has, it's sold. Like, I just saw a tweet today that said that between physical and digital, 3.5 million copies have sold
worldwide
of Final Fantasy VII Remake.
The only number I saw was 700,000 in Japan.
Yeah, it's 3.
That was so we're coming up to. We're almost to the third week. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a huge testament to how important this.
And I bought 2 of those fucking numbers.
Yeah, I know. Thank you, by the way. But yeah, so I would hope that they obviously see the success, and obviously, if I would assume if they're smart and there's a demand, that they'll do more. Like, do I want full blown, oh, like here's an entire game about Advent Children, and here's like I as much as I would love to see a more proper Dirge of Cerberus, something that's a little less dated, something that plays a little bit more like Vanquish maybe, which would be kind of cool, seeing freaking Vincent run around with freaking slide around all crazy with gunfighting and stuff. That'd be cool. But I'm not holding my breath. I just, if anything, I do want the core games, and if they have cosmetic DLC or maybe some little extra DLCs, like nods to other portions of it, because like one thing I wanted to ask that I didn't touch on when we talked about gameplay, the summons. So I don't remember, Leviathan wasn't an original summon in the OG, was he?
He is. He's just very hard to get.
Okay. Yeah.
He is actually part of not just the Wutai side quest. I'm a little foggy on it because I didn't do it on my last playthrough, but the materia itself is in Wutai, but you have to get a completely different item from a different part of the game to get to it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that opens the door because I know that there is a bunch of different summons and stuff that have been scattered throughout the various Final Fantasy titles. Like, I wouldn't mind seeing a couple of them. Like, I don't necessarily like maybe like Quizzicolt, for example, from Final Fantasy VIII. That'd be kind of cool
Yeah,
to
because
see.
that one isn't in 7.
Yeah, like I don't remember every single one of them that's in 7.
They have most of them. The Chocobo Chick is actually completely new.
Wasn't the Cactar new too, or was that in?
Yeah, the Cactuar is new as well, but the Chocomog
yeah,
is
Chocomog and Fat Chocobo, I know. Well,
um
wasn't Fat Chocobo like a random encounter with Chocomog when you summoned Chocomog that
I
you could get Fat Chocobo?
So. I think so.
Because
Looking it up, I'm pretty sure. Hang on. 'Cause now you have me wondering. Yeah, because all the results that come up is just for the remake, so I think Fat Chocobo is new.
yeah, I want to say when you summoned Chocomog in the original, you had the chance for it to drop Fat Chocobo instead.
But as far as summons you can look forward to,
Bahamut.
well, I already got him.
Oh. He's in the game. Oh.
Yes.
Spoiler for me, because I didn't know. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, fair enough. Well, the other
You are
Bahamuts.
correct, though. There's a 1 in 16 chance for Fat Chocobo to show up when you summon Chocomog.
Okay.
I never used that materia, so I didn't know for
I
sure.
think I used it at like very briefly in the beginning. Like I think I used it.
Yeah, in the remake I used it a couple times because it has wind on it, but I meant in the original.
Well, in the original too. Like I know that
okay.
that's kind of easily discarded because just like Ifrit, Shiva, and all of them kind of just outclass it.
Yeah,
basically.
So we can look forward to Rama, Odin,
Knights,
Kadjit, the bull,
Knights of the Round,
Knights of the Round, of course. Typhoon or Typhon, just a big tornado.
Mm-hmm.
Fucking Hades.
Was Siren in OG7 or was that only in
no?
8? Okay,
Siren's in 8.
She's in 8.
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, Doom Train
two
is also in 8.
2 other Bahamuts.
Yeah, the Bahamut Zero and Bahamut Final Bahamut or
no. I can't remember anything.
I know. I'm sorry to put this on you.
It's fine. Bahamut Zero. That's the last Neo Bahamut.
Neo Bahamut, thank you.
Is the one before that, the red one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm on the wiki. Why don't I just look at which summons are in 7? Because there's actually a lot. I don't use half of them.
Yeah.
Hades is really good, though. Shiva, Ifrit, Phoenix.
Okay.
Titan.
Oh, I forgot about Titan. Yeah.
Yeah, I said Kadjit earlier. It's Kujata, the bull.
Okay.
Yeah. Alexander.
Oh shit!
I forget Alexander is in 7. He's badass looking though.
Oh my god, yeah. Like that would be an insane boss fight. He's probably going to be huge.
Yeah, if they make you fight him, that would be insane. You just find him in the original game.
Yeah, because he's like a whole like in Final.
He's a castle.
Yeah, in Final Fantasy 14, he's freaking huge. There's like a whole raid, like several raids where you go through pieces of him.
Dang, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's all of them, actually. We listed all of them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I wish they had put Rama in this game just so that you would have a summon for each element.
That would be cool. Yeah.
Because all you have is wind, ice, fire, and then non-elemental with Bahamut and Leviathan.
Okay. Yeah, that would have been super cool. But yeah, just to see like maybe some of the other summons that were in like, you know, Final Fantasy 8 and such.
Yeah, there's definitely room for it, especially since they've given us Shiva and Ifrit so early.
Yeah.
And Leviathan.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Because you're not supposed to get Ifrit until the ship, until Junon.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what they do, but
Yeah.
can only
Um,
hope for the best.
anything else to add about what you expect to see?
No, I think I covered most of it.
Hmm.
I do wonder material wise how quad magic will work. I'm sure it'll work like as it's supposed to, but
Right. But see, the way they changed the magic where you have longer startup depending on what level you use,
mhm.
I could see quad magic taking forever to cast,
Yeah,
but it'll pay off if you get it.
yeah, and I'm sure that there will be stuff to like maybe make it faster or depending on the character
Yeah,
build.
I would like to see them somehow recontextualize stuff like Death Blow and you get one materia that slash all, so you hit all the enemies with just a regular attack. Then
Mhm.
you also get 2 times cut and 4 times cut, which, like I said, I would really like to see it recontextualized to work in this battle system. I don't
Yeah,
know what it would do. Like maybe it like extend your combo, give you a different combo. Like I don't know.
yeah. We'll definitely have to see going forward. There's a lot of things that they could do. We'll
Yeah.
just
When do you expect we'll see a trailer for part two? Not till next year.
if we're lucky, maybe next year. I'm not expecting it till probably 2022.
I don't think that long.
You don't think?
I think this next part will take 2 years to come out, so I expect a trailer next year.
Yeah, I mean, if they can crunch it out that quick, like I want them to take their time. Like I don't want them to freaking
I do too, but
push it
they're already
out.
working on it. So
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, hopefully if we don't see another crazy worldwide pandemic, we'll be okay, and we'll get E3, next year. So we'll
yeah,
definitely see. But yeah, that would be a
I
good time
could see
frame.
the next trailer being at E3 again. So
Yeah, that would definitely be a good time frame. But any final thoughts, man? That you wanna shout out before we wrap this up?
mm, Nomura, you're a crazy fucking bastard, but
But
keep making games.
but not as crazy as Kojima. So you got
He's
that.
close. He's close. Don't encourage.
All right. Where can people find you, man?
Just on Twitter mainly at Xanthan FGC.
Okay.
I don't really post YouTube or Twitch too much anymore. So if you go on Twitter, I just share a bunch of video game and anime memes, basically.
Yeah. And as always, guys, you can find me pretty much just about anywhere. I'm on YouTube, here on Twitch, where we're streaming this. YouTube archive will be up probably sometime tomorrow, so you guys can catch it there. And then, of course, all my links will be in the description. So for Twitter and everything else, you guys can find me at Daybreaker Rein. And this has been a lot of fun with Xanthan. I think this was a good second episode for this podcast. So I definitely hope we'll be able to get Xanthan on again for another discussion. I don't know when that will be. This is all kind of just sporadic and on the cuff. So we will definitely see where this goes. But until next time, guys, as always, this has been Daybreaker Rain and Xanthan, and we will catch you all in the next one. Take it easy, everybody.
Thanks for having me.